We'll call to order the study session of the Board of Education, agenda September 16, 2019. May I have a pledge of allegiance, please, by Myrna Morales, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources.
Please stand. Face the flag. Place your right hand over the heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Myrna. May I have a roll call, please?
Governing Board Member Garcia is out today. Governing Board Member De Leon.
Present.
Governing Board Member Hansen.
Here.
Governing Board Member Cuarenta. Here. Governing Board Member Gomez.
Here. Okay, may I have, next will be the approved study session agenda, September 16, 2019. May I have a motion to approve the study session agenda for September 16, 2019?
I'll move.
That would be Vivian Hansen made the motion. May I have a second?
I'll second.
That was Yesenia Cuarenta made the second. Any questions, any comments? So none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The vote was 4-0, motion passed. Now we're going to the hearing section. Persons wishing to address the board should fill out a blue card located on the table by the door and submit the card to the secretary. Speakers will be called in sequence during the hearing section, which is limited to 1 hour, and each speaker to one presentation of 3 minutes, unless the board wishes to waive the time limit. The board cannot engage in public discussion during this portion of the agenda. Government Code Section 54950 through 54963. Staff will follow up and address public inquiries if contact information is provided. Those who have a group concern are encouraged to select a spokesperson to address the board. Persons wishing to address the board on a specific agenda item at the time of the item is under discussion are limited to 3 minutes each and will be called to speak following the staff comment and prior to the board's discussion and taking action. The president of the board will now read the code of conduct beginning hearing portion. Oh, no, okay. Okay. So now we're going to go to the information items. This item is intended to keep the board informed on various district business matters that do not require formal action by the board. General services, new initiatives. The staff will present updates of the Board of Education on Odyssey STEM Academy first year, the new cosmetology program at the Adult School Education Center, K-5 science textbook adoption, math initiatives in K-12 that were implemented to address the need to increase math success. They will provide information on state priorities and local indicators in the LCAP and an update on Measure I projects to date. So then, Dr. Perez.
Thank you, Madam President. This evening, board members, we're so thrilled to be able to share with you some information about these are topics that are near and dear to all of us because they deal with instruction, they deal with initiatives to try to help our students achieve. And I wanted to mention to the board members, I was, right before the board meeting, I was reading that CSBA newsletter that you all receive, and there's information there, by the way, on special education and federal funding, which I know was a question that came up at the last meeting. And also there's information about performance across the state on SBAC and the major 2 reforms that our state has. Oh, gee, I'm sorry. I thought this was off. My sincere apology. Oh, it is off. I'm the right. Okay. There are 2 major reforms that the state of California has been involved in for years now, and it's LCFF, the Local Control Funding Formula, and the Common Core State Standards Initiatives. And what they're finding, as you will see in the report, is that our students are making progress on English language arts, but across the state, our students are still struggling with math. So tonight is a good opportunity to learn about our math initiatives to try to help our students with the transition to Common Core Math, because it is something very different, of which we've provided our teachers with a lot of training and continue to provide training and support. And board members, you also support coaches for our teachers in each of the schools. And that type of support is greatly appreciated by the Board of Education. But we are going to begin with Odyssey STEMS Academy. And I know that Mr. Nuthill, Keith, will be doing the presentation, as well as Becky, right? Okay. So I am going to turn it over at this time to both of them to share with us an update about how things are going at Odyssey. And we know the word is exciting and most hopeful. But I would like to share a little bit about our principals with you. First of all, Mr. Nuthill, we were really blessed to have him come join our team, because we had this High School Promise Initiative Committee where we explored with a very large committee what this high school should look like. And we had representation from the different high schools. We had students on it. We had administrators, teachers, parents, and we took trips to like 4 different schools to see what across the state looks different, that we could offer our students a different type of experience for learning. And when we were looking for a principal, I remember Dr. Smith reaching out to Mr. Nuthill, because he used to be a principal of one of these type of schools. And he said, well, what about me? I might be interested. So we became very excited to have an experienced principal join us. And I have to say that his experience in this type of curriculum and opening of a school has a lot to do with the success that our students are experiencing in a short amount of time. So I want to publicly thank Mr. Nuthill. And then Becky Perez, unfortunately, we're not related. But Becky is one of our own. She was a student who graduated as a pirate from our high school. And then she received a scholarship to Harvard. She and I have presented to parents on Déjala Ir, which is to encourage our parents who allow their Latina daughters to go away to college, because Becky was strong enough to tell her parents, I'm going. I got a full ride to Harvard and I'm going. And I was not. My mom told me, you're not going. And I didn't go. I went to a local college because of that. But Becky came back, and here she is serving in the Paramount community. So we are so proud and happy to have her as the Dean of Students at Odyssey STEM Academy. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the Odyssey team.
Okay, Becky, we're doing great. Thanks. So thank you very much for having us tonight. Board President Gomez, members of the board, Superintendent Perez, Executive Cabinet, and community. We are thrilled to be here tonight to have a conversation with you about our first year and our first 4 weeks of our second year. So again, thank you very much for having us. I'm going to start a little differently tonight. Different kind of school, different kind of start. And I want to tell you a story. And then we're going to weave this story throughout the presentation. It's a story that is very close to my heart. 25 some odd years ago, maybe 30 years ago, I went on a tour to factory with my father. And it was the Taylor Guitar Factory. And what I saw there was some wonderful craftsmanship that was going on in making guitars that were distributed worldwide. That factory is in El Cajon, down in San Diego area. And this summer, we worked pretty hard trying to pull a school together. And so Becky and I decided to we'd each take a day off at a different time, and she would do her thing and I would do my thing. And it happened that the day that I took off was the same day that my father passed away 3 years ago. And so I went back to the Taylor Guitar Company, and I wanted to see 25, 30 years later what was there. And what I found was incredibly interesting and became my opening kind of comments to staff as they returned to school. And what I learned when I was there was that 25 years ago, people were hand-making guitars. And when I went this summer and I looked over the factory floor, You saw CNC machines, laser cutters, 3D printers, all the things that you see in the Odyssey Idea Lab. And it was very much mechanical, or it's a robotic. How much that industry has changed in just that 25 years was really eye-opening. There was still some craftsmanship, certainly. But when I walked out and I looked on the left, I saw their belief statement. And when I saw the belief statement, I had to take a picture of it and send it to Becky. The belief statement says this: we believe at the heart of every great accomplishment, you will find a single common ingredient: courage. It's courage that allows us to explore, to push forward, to venture into the unknown. And while the decision to do so might not seem obvious, might seem obvious afterwards, it wasn't at the time. Because each time we make a bold choice, we go down a narrow road, we put something at risk: our ego, our reputation, our livelihood. Without courage, we would never dare, never change, never inspire. And that's why, whether you're a guitar player or a guitar builder, the world needs more of it: courage. And so we're going to talk today about some scholars. And I got to tell you one thing: our scholars have courage. And so we'll touch on that as we go through our presentation today. First slide, Elias and Galaviz. It's always good to have a freshman in your campus that has a beard. He looks like he's a senior. Great, wonderful scholars that we have here. And I'll kind of start with that very first line. At the heart of every great accomplishment, you will find a single common ingredient: courage. Becky's going to introduce you right now to one of our students, one of our scholars, and talk about her courage.
Okay. Meet Dayanara. This is a picture of Dayanara on our first day of school last year. You can just see the anticipation and the hunger and the readiness to learn on her face. This is before we got to know her. What I'd like to walk you through is what her learning trajectory looked like this year in terms of our learning through interest experience. This is our mentorship experience at Odyssey. So Dayanara is a very self-conscious, thoughtful, timid kid. She also has a lot of interest and a lot of skills and a lot of passion. And she identified that she wanted to work on making movies. So for her mentorship, she got picked up by the City of Lakewood City TV department. And her mentorship project was to make a whole video about what learning at Odyssey was like. And she went from the beginning ideation stages all the way to execution. She storyboarded the video. She wrote a script. She came onto campus several days with a full adult video crew who she directed and told them where to stand and what to do. And after all the hours of footage was taken, she edited it into a shorter video. Her mentor was Sally Cordova Gallagher from the City of Lakewood. And this is just one example of so many of our freshmen last year who picked something they loved, and despite being timid or being self-conscious or being unsure of themselves or scared to death, they went out there into the community and picked up some really amazing skills. So now I want to share a couple numbers with you. 131 were the number of freshmen last year who had an actual mentorship. There were 113 mentors in our community who stepped up to take one of our kids. And 64 is a number of hours that our kids served on internships. And these are 14-year-olds. They're freshmen. So this whole mentorship experience is centered around a project. And students are working towards, at the end of the trimester, presenting their learning in an exhibition. But before we begin, we sit down with them and we help them think through what is something that you want to get better at? What's a goal that you have? And this is a really hard question to ask freshmen because their go-to answer is, I want to become a better student, or I want to work harder, or I want to do my homework. But we really push them to be introspective and ask themselves, what's that really hard thing for you? And if you got better at that, it would open up so many doors. And even for us adults, like Keith and I do this, we do something called DDO where we talk and we think, what's the one thing, what's our backhand? If we got really better at it, it would make our impact stronger. And it's usually the thing that's hard to talk about. It's hard to say, the thing that you're kind of ashamed about. But our kids were really vulnerable and they were really honest. So if you look at her internship goals, she says that she wants to feel more confident in her ideas, and especially when she's speaking to others. And she knows that if she goes into the movie industry, that it's going to be a big problem for her. So she wants to be able to communicate well with others, and she also wants to learn how to edit videos. This is the goal that she put together before we even began. So then the 8-week process went on. She went into her whole video, she executed it, she made it happen. And when we were done, we celebrated with the end of trimester exhibition. And in the exhibition, every student stands up in front of an audience and they present, this was my mentorship experience, these were my goals, this was my project, this is how I got better. And we asked them to tell something called a soul story. So your soul story is, how did you grow? And as a person in your character, how did you develop? And what are some tangible examples of that? So in her exhibition reflection, she says that she met her goal. She says, this brings myself back to a goal I made in the first trimester, to be more open to others and not have these short, awkward conversations. I've accomplished this goal, which I honestly thought I couldn't do. And then she says, I have to thank my mentorship for this, which is my main artifact. So through her mentorship, through that relationship that she was able to build with the people who she worked with, she was able to develop those conversations, make that eye contact, engage adults in real work, and be able to also learn how to edit videos and make this happen. Would you all like to see her video? Yeah, we brought it. Am I doing this right? Okay.
There's a school in Lakewood that is changing the way students are learning and preparing for life.
Odyssey STEM Academy is an innovative high school experience situated in a really accessible environment, allowing all students to access their passion and their curiosity to do work that will hopefully eventually transform themselves and the world.
The National Science Foundation originally called it SMET, but in 2001 it was officially changed to STEM: science, technology, engineering, and math. The idea of STEM began to take shape in the 1950s with the launch of Sputnik and the space program in Russia and in the United States.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
In the 21st century, our country's leaders recognized the need to prioritize STEM education. At Odyssey, the teachers are referred to as advisors. They create a comfortable environment, encouraging a new approach to learning.
It's all about flexibility. I have a lot of freedom to teach not only kind of what I want, but how I want to teach. And while we do a lot of reading and writing at this school, the way in which we access that can be so different, even on a kid-to-kid basis. We center the learning around student interest in a way that is interesting to each individual scholar.
At Odyssey, we have a lab called the Makerspace, where students can be creative with their ideas and bring them to life.
The Makerspace is the epicenter of creation as it relates to engineering, technology, and design.
To see high school freshmen be able to program something, get it printed in a 3D printer, or get it laser cut.
The scholars are working on these kind of focused projects that are around a central theme or a central problem idea, and they're working collaboratively with a partner, with a group of people to build out their ideas in like tangible, real form through computer programming and through actual physical models.
And so for a school like this to be able to afford all students from this community that opportunity is pretty awesome.
Internships are a big part of the curriculum at Odyssey. Blue is getting hands-on experience at an auto repair shop.
My internship is at Odyssey. It's in Paramount. And what we do is we work on old VWs, old Volkswagens, and like the skills that I'm learning, like how to install brakes. I feel like I could use that later on in the future when I get my car.
Ever since day one of that mentorship, he's just been hands-on in the shop, doing something that he is truly passionate about. and at the same time, able to demonstrate his learning around our competencies here, but in a setting that is of interest to him.
Rebecca has an internship at an insurance agency.
Well, it's an office environment, and I feel like in the real world, it's office and how to interact with people and communicate. So I feel like that would really benefit me. And I feel like Odyssey is preparing me with how the interview process is going, like my resume and my interview with the people and how I'm going to interact with them. I feel like Odyssey is already preparing me for that.
A lot of times, if I learn that someone is from Lakewood, I immediately am drawn to that individual. And I say, oh my gosh, I just started teaching at a brand new school in Lakewood. And without fail, they will always ask, oh, what school? And that's my favorite part about where I am right now, because that's my opportunity not only to gush about all of the scholars and this wonderful place, but to detail for the community itself really the wonderful things that we have in store. And I think that that is a really powerful thing to be able to bring to the people of Lakewood. We're really excited to be here. Boom, you. Yes, you.
My name is Dayanara Sarabia, intern at City TV in Lakewood and proud scholar of the inaugural class at Odyssey STEM Academy.
Isn't that amazing? 14, and she was able to clip the whole video together and work with her team. So it's courage that allows us to explore, to push forward, to venture into the unknown, and not just for our students. It takes courage for us to do our work. And we did this. We were able to think about and envision what an awesome education would look like for students in our community. And we've made it happen. So we're a year in. The next phase, Keith is going to share some data with you, kind of paint a picture of where we've come.
In the packet that we gave you tonight, there's a mentor guide. So at some point, take a tour through the mentor guide. It's the guide that we give the community professionals that gives them an insight into what our mentor program is really all about. Oftentimes, we change the word mentorship with internship. We found in the community when the scholars are 14, 15 years old, if you're asking for a mentor, you're more successful to land it. If you ask for an internship, it has a different kind of baggage with it. So sometimes we exchange words in that way. But I think this is where we feel the unwavering support of really the Board of Education and Superintendent Perez and the Executive Cabinet and community around moving forward and building a school that's different in many ways. So one of the questions that you ask is, well, how are you doing? So a little bit of data here for you. We are only in a year, but I think it's important to kind of reflect back. The one thing that I've done at all of my schools is a little bit different. And so when you look at this column on the left, that'll be Odyssey. And on the right, that is Newport Harbor High School. So in the end, our babies have to compete with their babies. That's just how the world is. So when we think about our work in our site council, our school single site plan, our WASC work that we do, we're comparing ourselves against Newport Harbor. When I was in San Diego, we compared ourselves with La Jolla High School. So that was just how we went about doing our work. So what you'll see here is the first set of data is around free and reduced lunch of the two schools. The second piece of data is those students taking A to G coursework and earning a C or better. And so when you look at Newport Harbor High School, this is for seniors, but we have, actually now it's gone up a little bit. We have about 88 to 90% of our scholars that are on track to meet A to G. That's a big number, folks. And it's growing and it will get a little bigger. We anticipate, or we know right now, for example, that we have 2 students that are repeating some 9th grade coursework. That's 2 students. That's not 2%. That's 2 students that we felt didn't meet our competency, our proficiency level, and needed to go back and do some more work. Chronic absenteeism is down compared to that high school, and our suspension rate's about the same. If we flip over and we look at PSAT scores in math, when our scholars came to us from middle school, we took the PSAT in October, I think, Becky. Our scholars are outperforming the state average by a little bit and outperforming the literacy by quite a bit. And so I think that's an important benchmark for us as well. One thing I learned, there was a point in time in my life when I was the assessment director for the County Office of Education in San Diego. And what I've learned about this type of data and CAS data as well is this is a measure of some academic performance, but it's also a measure of connectedness to school. So students that are connected to school tend to do better on state assessments. They just do. So if you correlate back to your like Healthy Kids data and you look at your assessment data, that's the CASP or in this case the PSAT, there's some correlation there. So not only is it about the academics, it's about their connection to school. So this is the first window into some math and literacy benchmarks. When you think about our new freshmen that are coming in, a little bit more data, one thing that we do is that we put, Becky and I are in front of every 8th grader in the Paramount Unified School District. So we actually go to science classrooms, we spend the day, and we, when we're recruiting students, and we're there giving students the feedback or the information they need about the school. We hold somewhere between 6 to 8 parent nights that parents can come to with their young people. And then I think the next piece is just absolutely critical for Becky and I think for Paramount. And that is that anyone is welcome to come to Odyssey. Odyssey is a small school, it does things differently, so it might not be for everyone, but it's for anyone. And so there's no behavior index, there's no GPA index. Our application process, I like to say, is very, very complex. You put your name on a piece of paper and you hand it to Rosa. We put you in a random lottery and we pick out students randomly that come out of the hopper. And so we believe that it's our job and our commitment to take an 8th grader from where they are and move them to an unbelievable great place so that they're ready for career college in life. And when you're an 8th grader, you don't know what you want to do for a living. You're just kind of starting out. So we just believe that our school is for the community of Paramount, not for a particular segment of that. People and parents do have to make the choice to come to Odyssey. We understand that. But that bottom number in the middle, this year, our 9th grade class, 17% of our 9th graders are special education. That's a big number. Generally, that number is around 10. So that's another mark of really our school being open to the community. 57% of our scholars in our freshman class were a STEM school, are female. 17% are students with disabilities. 22% are students that Becky and I refer to as opportunity students. Those are students that has D's and F's and the lowest scores on the CAS test. We hand place every single student in their classrooms in balance. We don't track students. What we do is we take every single student and essentially treat them as an individual, and we move them through the work that we do. So we don't track students. We don't segregate kids. We don't believe that's the right way to go about doing high school. So that tells kind of a little bit of a story about data that we have. And when you look at these numbers and you look at this slide back here, again, having students that are engaged in a college prep coursework, and 88% of them are on track at the end of the freshman year, that's a good number to start with. We think that number will be 98% in 2 more weeks. Because we're a competency-based school, we still have some scholars that are working towards reaching competency. By the way, in order to earn a C at Odyssey, you have to meet expectation on every single competency, everything. And so it takes sometimes a little longer for us to get some students there, but we're built to be able to support them in that way to get them there. So I'm going to pass it on to Becky around this piece of student work that she found, I think probably in the second week of school last year.
This is Victoria's work sample. And at night, I like to look through student work, find all kinds of treasures. And I found this wormhole. Kids kind of do like a flow stream of consciousness, and they're charting out their ideas. And I found this quote. I don't know if you can see it, but it says, "I lost my creativity, but I think this school is helping me get that back." So I was so moved by Victoria's idea. I've spoken to her several times about it. I just spoke to her a couple weeks ago. And if you could see the whole chart, She talks about being creative and asking questions and being artistic in elementary school, and it went away, and how she's reconnecting with that part of herself now. And there's a way that we do this at Odyssey. Our studio work revolves around our makerspace, which is grounded in a really incredible partnership through NewView. NewView is a spinoff from MIT. They're an organization that builds curriculum to teach outside the box, hands-on, innovation, project-based learning. And they're incredible. And if you look at this list of NewView X schools, you're going to see a lot of fancy schools on here. And look, that's us in the third column. Just so incredibly proud to be able to offer this resource to students in my community. And when I see them in the makerspace, cutting, designing, they're online, they're Skyping with architects at MIT and showing them their work and getting feedback and tweaking their work based on the ideas that they get from real experts. I think of Victoria, and I think if she was able to get some of her creativity back in just a few weeks, I'm so excited to see what she'll be like at the end of senior year when we're ready to send her off to an incredible future. So I want to show you one of Victoria's projects. So we have design challenges every trimester. And one of the design challenges was to design a mechanism that made a person's life better. So there's her and Michael, and they're going to walk you through what their little machine does. This is Victoria on the left.
So this is a sensor, and we programmed it so it could be a certain number of distance and detect something, like our hand. Like when we put our hand, it outputs it into audio. So when you hear it in the speaker, and it warns you before you bump into something, like kind of like a guide dog, like you could say, like it could warn you before you bump into something, like it guides you. So that's why we made it, like for the blind.
Very cool. How did you come up with the idea?
Well, I kind of came up with the idea because I was thinking, oh, maybe like a lot of people suffer from blindness, so I thought maybe I could like make something that's easy to wear and it could help them out, like not bumping in, because I don't know how I would survive without eyes to see.
Do you know anybody who's blind who can't see?
I do.
You do? Family?
Yeah, family.
I'll be back.
So what's the components and technology you're using?
So this is an ultrasound. This is a speaker connected to an Arduino in the back right here. So it has the battery. Like a light. So turn around. Like this ain't working. And this Arduino is connected to the ultrasound. So when the ultrasound gets a distance, it sends it back here, and depending on the distance, the speaker to the side will start sounding like it'll start beeping. Yeah.
Last question. You guys having fun?
Yeah, that was fun. This is called the echo sensation.
Okay. So we wanted to share Victoria's story because Keith shared data, and data is important because it gives you a broad view, but it's also important to stop and take a look how it's impacting individual students. So while the decision to do so may have seemed obvious afterwards, it wasn't at the time. When we first started working on Odyssey, when I first came on board, we were headed towards making this a Project Lead the Way school. And Project Lead the Way is a great engineering program. I worked with it in my previous role here in Paramount. We were wondering about how it would match with the vision, with the collective vision that we all came up with together to make this school a hands-on, innovative place that will help kids prepare for the future and kind of allow them to think more open-endedly. And that's how we came across NewView, which matched our vision exactly. Yeah.
I think this is one of my favorite pictures. It talks about, doing something at risk and our ego and reputation and livelihood. we decided, as Becky said, to put in this program. And we believe that the power in this program is special. And so when I look at this picture right here, what I think about is the movie Friday Night Lights. And the reason why is because at Odyssey we have 24 portable buildings. We're on an elementary school setting and they've been renovated. This happens to be a renovated library. We don't have a football team. We don't need pads and uniforms and maintenance to that big stadium. We don't have a basketball team or a theater or a band or cheerleaders. This is our Friday Night Live. So this is what our scholars thrive to do and what they're really interested in doing. And so when I think about this and I think about our partner with NUVU and thinking about how we are bringing this type of experience right here in Paramount that is normally found around the world in some of the top prep high schools in the world, this is our Friday Night Lights. This is what the kids get up in the morning to come do. And then we have another piece of this that's similar that we're going to share, and it's our environmental sustainability complex that we've recently opened. But we're going at this in a different way, and our scholars interacting with people in Cambridge, and they're in the space with us. We video conference with them. They help us assess the data to make sure our students are on track. Is really something to see. So I'm going to hand the next piece over to, this is mine as well. This idea about, we tried something different here. And in this particular piece, we inspired. So students are in this space and they feel as though they're working in a world-class STEM facility as a result.
When we think about our year 2 curriculum, we definitely needed more courage. So we got our makerspace going. Freshman year is going great. And then we went back to the drawing board and said, what will year 2 look like? How will we extend the vision? So now we have an outdoor makerspace. And I don't know if you've been there yet, but it's pretty outstanding. It ties together the learning in humanities and science. And our sophomores are out there figuring out how we're going to together make the world more sustainable and make it a more healthy place. So a friend of ours helped us put together a sizzle reel. And it's like a short video that captures what this year will look like for sophomores.
A dire warning about climate change. According to a new report, experts say that we have until 2030 to avoid catastrophe.
Indonesia to move the capital city because of rising floodwaters. As Puerto Rico and Florida prepare for tropical storm Dorian, Trump is working to pull millions of dollars.
It's right below us, right here, and right now. Unprecedented heat wave. The next generation would be justified in looking back at us and asking, what were you thinking?
It's been a while since I made a video. Well, a vlog.
Hi guys, my name is Pamela Villarreal.
Laura Gonzalez.
And
I'm a 10th grader at Odyssey STEM Academy. Today, we want to discuss the topic of
This new program that we have where we do environmental sustainability.
I like whales.
My name is Paul Hudak. I'm the Environmental Sustainability Coordinator here at Odyssey STEM Academy, and I'm working with our scholars this year to help build an environmental sustainability program.
not only are we gonna be researching and finding out ways how we can help the earth, but we're gonna have a little farm.
Food production, planting trees,
Avocados to cilantro.
biodynamic growing, permaculture, worm composting, aquaponics, cooking. It's a really comprehensive seed-to-table approach. And this first year, they're going to have a huge hand in building this project. First day of school, it's just like this, right? So it's like a clean slate. It's an empty greenhouse.
Good morning!
Good morning! So glad you're here today. You know, today is the first day of school. How cool is that? Well, it's pretty simple. Get to know your kids. Show them that you love them. Show them that you really want to know about them and who they are as people. And you're going to be a little vulnerable today. Do that.
Good morning.
And it's the first day of high school. It's such a big day in their life. Our idea here is just to make sure it's as welcoming as possible.
Make as much noise and open as many doors as we can.
Becky and I are co-founders of Odyssey STEM Academy.
Odyssey STEM Academy is a high school in Paramount Unified School District that gives students an opportunity to learn differently.
My name is Courtney, and I'll be teaching the 10th graders next year for humanities. This is an entire year's worth of planning. So on this side is where we'll start researching, identifying solutions, having critical conversations. They're going to be building a cross-industrial annotated timeline.
So it's not just about growing food and having pizza. It's really about, fertilizers, and it's about soil pH and water levels.
And really, whatever they're excited about, we want to encourage them to not just keep it here, really getting them out into the community as activists.
And this is really where our class starts to feel super cross-curricular. And I think that's where they're going to be so hyped.
Because we put them in situations that not normal high schoolers would be in. And there's not a lot of high schools out there that build on this idea of trust.
It's good that they're teaching us about it in school because it's definitely something that we can put to the real world.
This is where the garden is going to start blooming, and they're going to start to have real tangible things I am doing something.
This is a question that Becky and I have all the time.
I walk around here and I feel successful and I feel proud, but there's a part of my heart that worries about what about everybody else? All the other young people and educators beyond the 144 freshmen that we admit every year.
Around the world, we know that climate change is real. Empowering our young people is it's a tremendous responsibility.
I start working with scholars in 3 days, and there's about 20 days worth of legwork that I need to do. It comes off easy, but it doesn't. This soil is not healthy, so to speak. It's been turf for a really long time. There's a lot of gophers and moles in the dirt around here.
I hope there's no problem.
More work, more stress. There might be a little bit more chaos.
And some of the students are already asking about animals. I don't know what the policy is for that.
Disaster has struck.
We're setting out to do something here that's never been done before. And that inherently is going to come with a lot of bumps.
It's not some students, it's every student. And finding their niche in that, as it relates to sustainability, will be tricky.
I do actually feel a little anxious about it because sometimes I'll be at home trying to read a book or watch TV, and then all of a sudden I'm just thinking about wow, the amount of time that we have to fix this is so little.
But my dreams are not dreams, but goals that I can reach if I work hard.
What an honor to get to facilitate that and to get to give them the skills and the context that they need to make that happen. That's why I'm a teacher. That's why I'm here.
I think part of what excites me the most is that we are able to empower our students to own this project and this program. With sustainable agriculture, you're not necessarily feeding the plant, you're feeding the soil, you're building a living soil. Over the course of the school year, we will grow beautiful students and beautiful plants.
But then the big question is, how do we extend this thing from Paramount community to California, the United States, and then a global view?
I think this is it.
I genuinely believe that my generation is going to be up to the task and is willing to do what we need to do. We have all the information. The only thing that we need is support to come together and actually do it.
We're ready to jump in and get dirty.
All we can do is do the best we can do every single day until we know better, and then we do better. That is what drives this school. It's what drives change.
Hopefully this year brings good things.
So a couple of things about the video. One of them is that we don't have bees on campus. It's part of a video that was meshed together by a filmmaker that we happen to know. And the other point I want to make about this particular piece is our STEM, let me step back a second. You know, there was a time many years ago when I served on the California Science Framework Committee. I'm a science teacher at heart. And so when I look at our STEM facility and I compare it to the STEM facility and I had in my last school, which had 3,000 square foot labs, $4 million worth of science equipment, and I compare it to the type of work that our students in Paramount are doing with the makerspace and the environmental sustainability complex, it's stronger science. It's stronger science because it's real. We're not doing labs that have been done over and over and over again for the last 50 years. Our kids are involved in things that are happening today. We're partnering with people in the local community to feed them. We partnered with an equine facility to help them with our makerspace, build a sensory lab. And so we're supporting our community through STEM, and it makes it far more engaging for the students. We didn't make up the science program. It comes to us from the National Academy of Engineers. The National Academy of Engineers in 2006 came up with something called the Grand Challenge. The first Grand Challenge is about the joy of life. How can science and engineering help the joy of life? That's what our 9th grade year is all about. The second Grand Challenge is around environmental sustainability and sustainability in general, and partnering with the UN and their sustainability project. That's what our second year is all about. It's not only about sustainability of STEM. Let's make no mistake. This is about sustainability of public secondary education. This is also about high school and doing high school differently. So we're tracking that as well, and students are having conversations around sustainability in the environment and the sustainability in the environment that they're actually living in. And then the junior year is around public health. And how are we going to feed the people? How are we going to keep them healthy? And so turn on the news, and these are the things that you see today. And so our science program is powerful because it's hands-on, and kids are working on real work. So the last piece of this that we want to think about, it goes back to the Taylor Guitar Company. So remember, it was craftsmanship in the beginning, it's craftsmanship at the end. But there's a whole lot of robots in there. There was a whole lot of change in there. So Dr. Perez talked a little bit about my background. And my background has been coaching schools and principals from Baton Rouge, Louisiana to Bettendorf, Iowa, all the way to Bangor, Maine, and down the southern coast to the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, Washington State, Northern California. That's been my 35 years. Is trying to make a ding in the universe about high school. Because here's what we know. On comprehensive student high schools across this country, Paramount, not Paramount, Downey, Baton Rouge, you have students that are asking this question. Our young people are waiting. They're waiting for something different because not much has changed in the last time since I went. My 40th year anniversary, or my 40th year reunion was just 2 weeks ago. Not a whole lot different in those schools that I've been in. There's a whole lot of kids in the middle, about 70% of them, that are stuck in the curriculum and those not engaging to them. What are we going to do? So when we talk about courage, a lot about that. And not just Paramount, but the state of California and beyond. So we're taking our best shot. We don't bunt. We take a full swing at Odyssey. And I think Becky can speak a little bit to that, and then we'll kind of be done with our presentation. But we talked about, there's a little piece on the tape that says, so this is only for 144 kids, right? A little bit about that.
When I took the position at Odyssey, part of my heart broke because, sure. When I took the position at Odyssey, I was really conflicted because in my previous role, I worked with CTE and I felt like I reached so many more students. Moving to Odyssey, I only had 144. Now I have 280. But I worry about my community. What about everybody else? What about the 16,000 students in Paramount who I love and I feel invested with? I want them on this journey too. I want them to learn deeply. I want them to be creative. I want them to ask good questions. I want them to not be tracked, for all of us to expect for each one of them to be successful. So I'm loving Odyssey, but sometimes I look around and I think, how's everybody else doing out there? And I'd like to help spread the ideas. I thank you for your courage because, Keith, you said not much has changed in 20 years, and I get to walk through Paramount schools every day still, and I see a lot has changed in Paramount. I see night and day from what I went to school with when I'm walking through Odyssey. But there's just a little part of my heart that wonders about, what about the other kids? They need this too. And we just want to call your attention here to our team values, which are the cornerstone of how we do our work. These 6 beliefs are what drive our work. And our work is hard, and sometimes conflicts happen, sometimes we disagree, sometimes we look at each other like, you're not stepping up. And when we have these difficult conversations, are always grounded in these beliefs. Our belief in every kid's infinite potential, generosity, humility, vulnerability, joy, accountability. And you'll notice courage is on here. And that's new. That's new this year. Having the courage to do the right thing, having the courage to expect more and to make it happen.
So if you're in the neighborhood, Becky and I, we drink tea. So stop by. We'll have a cup of tea together. If you're looking for coffee, you're going to have to come to Starbucks and bring it with you because you're going to be drinking your own coffee. But these are our babies right here. And we love them. And we appreciate the opportunity to be able to share our school with you. And again, stop by and see us. You don't have to call ahead. Just come on by. And we'll hook you up with some of our kids and show you some of the exciting things that we do. So thank you again for your unwavering support for Odyssey STEM Academy.
Thank you.
And we look forward to growing and becoming better and better.
Do any of the board members have any questions or any comments for Dr. Keith? And
my comment is that I know there's a lot of teachers that are worried because they don't actually do what you're doing. But I really like to say that I really trust you and your staff because we do have to think outside the box. We're moving on. Kids want different things. And what we're going to see in the future, we can't even imagine. That's what the California School Boards Association tells us. And so we can't stick to the old ways, and we have to have courage to change. And I really like that the students are courageous to think outside the box. And at one point, they might feel uncomfortable, but then they gain that confidence. And we have to entrust and empower our students and give them that trust that they could think on their own. And we as teachers facilitate that learning. So I'm really proud of this school. So thank you for your hard work.
yes, I ditto that. I just have one question though. By looking at these slides, I see that the how we're doing and the comparison with Newport Harbor. Why did we not compare Newport Harbor to the how we are doing with the PSAT state? Why do we do it through the state and not through the same comparison?
Yeah, great question. So I asked Ryan, and they don't have individual school data on the PSAT for 9th grade, or I would have done that. Yeah, good question.
Ms. Gomez, that's correct. We don't get other schools' PSAT scores or SAT scores for that matter. That's not public. So Keith gave you a smattering of what is public. And so in this case, all the College Board shares are state averages when it comes to PSAT or SAT scores. AP for that matter too.
Okay, thank you. And one other question. Do all students get an internship? And do they get the internship they want?
So there's a couple of things to consider in that. We are an interest-based school. And so we do our very best. If you were to walk in our freshman classes and sophomore classes right now, we build big interest walls. So it's the first thing we do in the first few weeks of school. So they're all the way to the ceiling and they're, 6-8 feet wide. And it talks with, we do a lot of surveys to find out what their interests and passions are, and things around career stuff, things around values and that sort of thing. And then we use those charts to help them be able to identify places in the community that they may be able to intern. They do informational interviews. They do they build resumes. They pound the pavement. They find their own. So about probably 75% of the students last year found their own internships. Some of them we got from the district, and some we get from Lakewood City, those sorts of things. But what I've learned in this in my past school when I did internships, when I found them for the young people, they weren't nearly as valued. Mm-hmm. So to get more directly to your point, our goal is to have them find the one that really is about their interest. And so it's driven in that way, and their projects are in that way. Their interest might not be STEM, by the way. It could be fashion. It could be many different things, and we think that's great. So, you follow your passion in that. And you're really driving the bus, though. I mean, you're setting up the project. You're working with your mentor in the sophomore year. It's pretty well hands off. Your deal. They start in there. There'll be interns starting in just next week, going out in the community and beginning to work with people and people that worked with last year. And sometimes it's people that they found that's new because they have a different interest now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then my last question is, how do parents know about their students being qualified to be able to go? I know it's a lottery, but how do parents really know about this?
So our kind of recruitment campaign is thorough. And so what we do is, and it's multi-layered. And so the way we do this is that every single family of an 8th grader in the city of Paramount gets a letter. And that letter has a description of the school and some information, has the application packet, and it has list of dates that they can come and talk to Becky and I, and kind of to find out more about the school. And then Becky and I are in my 8th grade classes, all of them. And we have we're in front of every student. We do it through the science classes, and we communicate with them. So we have a pretty thorough outreach in terms of students knowing that Odyssey is an option for them. And I think the other thing to understand is coming to a new school, we get back to this word courage. It takes a lot of courage for a student to change and come to a new school.
Absolutely.
And so with that, what we're most proud of, and Becky's led this, is our onboarding process with parents. So in the fall, once we have the lottery and it's over, come watch Becky do Socratic seminars with parents around our design principles and our mission. And we have family profiles that they put together. And it's amazing to watch our families get together and share their passion with each other, and then learn about the school in a really interesting way.
Do you see an increase from last year to this year, because I believe we started last year, on the number of students interested in going to Odyssey?
So there's a little bump. Maybe a 5% bump. But this is what I would tell you. My experience in building small schools is that won't continue to rise. So what will happen is the people that come to Odyssey, families in the community, will get to understand what the school's about. And when they understand what the school's about, then there'll be less applications because there's not people just randomly putting their hat in the ring. But then when they apply, we don't lose many. Right? So right now we still have people apply that kind of know about the school, but they're kind of working on that, and they show, I don't know. So we have a little what I call the trickle effect. But the longer the school's around, the more stable it is. The applications go down, but those are the people that really want to come.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Great.
Thank you very much. Our next presentation is on the new cosmetology program at the Adult School Education Center. And Principal Livon Rodriguez is going to give us an update on this high-interest program. And I want to commend her and her leadership for all the work that was done to get this program started.
I'm just looking for the presentation. I see it. Thank you. Good evening, President Gomez and members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Perez, Executive Cabinet, and guests. I truly appreciate the opportunity to provide you with an update on our cosmetology program. The purpose of the presentation is to provide the key details and objectives of the cosmetology program, to explain the pathway to cosmetology certification, to highlight the value of Paramount Adult Schools program, and to share accomplishment to celebrate and identify next steps and answer questions. Our first cosmetology class, let's see if we can get, there we go. Our first cosmetology class was offered in the spring of 2019 in partnership with Compton College. In the implementation of the program, our objectives were to expand the number of career technical education courses offered at Paramount Adult School. In the choice of cosmetology, we are looking at a career that continues to grow, According to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, employment of barbers, hairstylists, and cosmetologists is projected to grow 8% from 2018 to 2028, faster than the average for all occupations. The average cosmetologist in California makes about $26 an hour. Additionally, through our partnership with Compton College, students are provided an established pathway which may lead to certificate or associate of science degree. The field of cosmetology prepares students for a variety of careers, including esthetician, where students may earn on the average $20 an hour. And if they work at Massage Envy, they can earn as much as $35 an hour. If a student chooses to be a manicurist or pedicurist, they can earn $17 an hour, or they may choose to be a makeup artist that earns approximately $28 an hour. Moreover, the cosmetology program leads towards state licensure. When we look at the pathway to cosmetology, students completing Cosmetology 104 and 105 with the 2.0 GPA and above may earn a certificate of accomplishment. These students can work as shampoo assistants or may work in a type of salon as a receptionist. A student earning a certificate of achievement completes courses 104 as well as those listed in the second column here. And they're proficient in haircutting, coloring, permanent waving, manicuring, pedicuring, and facials. These students have 1,600 hours that prepares them to take the California State Board of Cosmetology examination. Students wishing to earn an Associate of Science degree must complete all the additional required general education courses for the degree. There is definite value in taking the cosmetology program at Paramount Adult School, as it costs a PAS student $558 the first semester, while it would cost a Compton College student over $2,000. The main difference being the requirement to purchase a student kit. As we look at celebrations about cosmetology, there was a high interest in the course at PSS. We enrolled 22 students in our first course in the spring of 2019. 13 students completed Cosmetology 104, and I'm happy to say that the same 13 students are enrolled in Cosmetology 105 this fall semester. Additionally, we had some ESL students taking the course who were at the beginning high and intermediate levels of their English acquisition. These students were able to take the tests for the course in Spanish. Our next steps are that Compton College is purchasing 18 workstations for the cosmetology room. Additionally, for Cosmetology 105, we'll be adding a room. It's room 32, which is right next to the cosmetology room, where students will be trained on facials, manicures, pedicures, and massages. Compton College is also purchasing the equipment for these procedures. At the end of the semester, it is our intent to see the 13 students presently in Cosmetology 105 move on to complete the program at Compton College. Questions?
I have a question. It's stated in one of the on one of the slides, on the celebration slide, 22 students initially enrolled. What was the final number of students enrolled?
There were 22 students were enrolled and 13 students finished.
Okay, so it's not an issue. That was a
Yes,
final
yeah.
count. Okay, I thought that was
22 were first enrolled and then 13 finished. And it was for a variety of reasons, childcare, maybe that they found maybe had to take a job instead of continuing on with the program.
And then my second question would be, it stated that it accommodated several adult ESL programs. Exactly how many ESL?
There was about 5 ESL students in that range. And for that, we also had an instructor from Compton College that spoke Spanish, so was able to clarify for students information.
Ms. Gomez, if I may, I'd like to add to that.
Sure.
Accommodating any ESL adult students in this type of college class is fairly unique. We had to kind of think outside the box along with our partners from Compton College to make those accommodations, because typically students that are still in the process of learning English, they typically haven't been accommodated in the ways that we were able to in our program through our resources and with our partnership with them. So this part is a really important part for us, especially considering that the adult school services a lot of adult students who are interested in not only learning English, but also developing a career skill. And so we think that this is an attractive part of the program, especially with it being in our community as opposed to the students having to travel to Compton. And we think this is something that will help the program grow over the long haul.
Absolutely. Thank you. And what steps have been taken by the program specialists to collaborate with the adult transition program to ensure that students in the Paramount adult transition has the same access to the cosmetology program?
As far as specialists, the district specialists?
Well, the adult school specialist?
Adult school specialists. Within our meetings with Compton College, one of the things was to pay close attention to the adult school student. Our adult school students, we're talking about, the last presentation talked about being courageous, being bold. Sometimes walking on the adult school campus is courageous, is bold. And for our students to be able to say, I want to try to take a college course, that is also first time they've ever done that. Many of our students, the difference between us and going to Compton is we have our counselor who's sitting right there, out online with them, doing the application for Compton College. We have our counselor who's sitting right there, helping them to fill out the FAFSA, the financial aid application. That doesn't happen when you go to a college. So we provide support, and we are in it to make our students successful. And so when we look at being courageous and doing those kinds of things, those are our students who are doing that. One woman, and I was just surprised. It just shocked me. She is probably we're going back to the old ESL stuff. I'm thinking she's probably about early intermediate. And she sat there, and the reason she got through this is because she has a family member who's in cosmetology. So some of the content knowledge is there about cosmetology. But to see her, she's my age, to see her going and doing this and continuing on to class 105, and knowing that it took a lot of hard work for her to understand the text, for her to be able to do those tests, is amazing. And it's just, our mouths just dropped open when we saw her do this. And she's doing this because she lost her husband a couple of years ago, and she needs to make a living.
My final question. My final question, sorry, I didn't have the thing on. My final question is, what are the steps needed to assist cosmetology to transfer? You say we have counselors, but do our counselors help them get in?
Good question. Because what we do is we take our students and we want to make sure they're there. There's phone calling that goes on between our counselor and the Compton College counselor. For example, we had new students coming into the 104 cosmetology, the first year who started. It's a blend this year. Small group is 104, small group is 105. So what we did was our counselor brings those students in. Our counselor connects with Compton College. We just don't say, here's the room, here you go. No, our counselor is with them. And why do we do that? Because they're our students. They see our counselor, they know a contact. If they can't come in contact with somebody from Compton College, they're in contact with our counselor. It's really nice for them to be able to walk in our office and share whatever they need.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions or comments by any of the boards?
I actually do have a question. Thank you, Board Member Hanson. As far as the timeline, Dr. Rodriguez, it says next steps. Do we have a timeline for that?
Next steps for the timeline, we are actually, we plan on those students taking 105. We are working with them to transfer to Compton College when they're going. The timeline as for, if we're talking about the equipment and things that are coming in, that is something that's coming up. That's something I think we hope to do probably pretty soon, if I'm not mistaken, within probably, Dr. Smith?
Correct. Our friends at Compton College, we actually had a meeting last week, and members of Mr. Frutos's team were kind enough to join us. And so we've been working together with our partners at Compton College. So we'll have furniture coming in real soon. Compton College got a good sense of what the need is moving forward now that we're offering both class 104 and 105. There was also some discussion around the facility itself in terms of what additional infrastructure, if any, would possibly be needed to accommodate certain types of hair dryers and things like that. And so Mr. Frutos's team is working closely with their team to gather that information, and then we'll identify next steps moving forward and hopefully continue to build our program together.
Great, thank you.
So the first class started spring of 2019. So when is? Oh, I'm not on. The first class of enrollment was spring of 2019.
Correct.
And so when will you open the class again for the students to start 104?
We actually opened it this fall.
Oh, okay.
So there's another group taking 104.
Oh, okay.
And there's another group. There's one group taking 104 and one group taking 105.
Okay. And we had how many new enrollees?
New enrollees, I believe what happens is we work with Compton, so we're constantly on the phone. They close off the class, and because it's a class where there's 2 courses going simultaneously, they limited the number. So the number was 8. We had more people interested, but they're going, no more people.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Dr. Rodriguez. Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. Our next presentation has to do with the planning and implementation of a textbook adoption in science. Very unique time with the next generation science standards. And I've also asked Kelly to share with the board the process for an adoption of a textbook and the training that LACO and others provide for a committee to adopt textbooks.
All right, good evening, Board President Gomez, members of the board, Dr. Perez, Executive Cabinet, and guests. Tonight, I'd like to share information with you regarding the Next Generation Science Standards, the NGSS, with respect to our K-5 planning and implementation. Okay, so the purpose of the presentation is to revisit information on the Next Generation Science Standards, and to also review the process for evaluating and recommending new science textbooks and materials for implementation next year in all of our K-5 schools. So exactly what are the NGSS? So the NGSS integrate 3 dimensions of science. There are 3 dimensions that have equal importance, and they all work together to provide students with a coherent understanding of science. So the first dimension are the science and engineering practices. These are the behaviors for investigating and building. So those behaviors that scientists use to investigate the natural world and those behaviors that real engineers use to design and build models, these are the behaviors that we want our students to engage in. So this is the first dimension. The next dimension are the disciplinary core ideas. These are key concepts specific to the course content. These are somewhat synonymous to like the grade level standards, except they're unique because they're actually K12. And they encompass kind of a broad scope of standards that address the different domains of science, the earth and space science, life science, physical science, and engineering. Those are the 4 different domains that are addressed in the DCIs, or the disciplinary core ideas. And then the third dimension of the next generation science standards are the cross-cutting concepts. These are the concepts that link various science domains. So for example, concepts such as patterns, cause and effect, systems. So if we think, for example, about earth and space science, I'll just give you an example. We have like systems such as the hydrosphere and the biosphere, and they interact together. But when we study life science, we study ecosystems, and we learn about how the web of life and how different species interact together. So whether you're studying earth and space science, or life science, we're studying systems. So it's kind of like a common thread or a lens through which students can learn about science and make connections across the different domains. So why next generation science standards? Well, they are written to address the science expectations of high-performing countries to ensure that our students can compete in the global economy. So the standards are benchmarked so that we ensure that our students can work at the same level of rigor as those students from high-performing countries. They prepare students to pursue career opportunities in science and engineering related fields in the 21st century, essentially for careers that don't even exist yet in some cases. And then in addition to the actual science content, the next generation science standards also include some of those 21st century skills such as critical thinking, communication, creativity, collaboration that are also necessary for rapid advancements in both science and technology. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background in terms of what we've been doing at the elementary level over the last couple of years. So last school year, we did NGSS awareness, professional development for all of our K-5 teachers. And that was the first time that teachers came to learn about the next generation science standards. We began with monthly science lead teacher meetings. So lead teachers are essentially like a liaison between the schools and the district office. So we develop these teachers so that they can go back, share information regarding implementation with their teachers, and start implementing some of the shifts with respect to the science content as well and instruction. We also provided 2 lessons for each grade level, K-5, so that the teachers could try getting their feet wet with respect to NGSS. So when they came to the professional development, we shared some of those shifts, and then the lessons represented those shifts or reflected those shifts so that they could actually experience them with their students. And then last year, the CAS, the California Science Test, was operational in grade 5. And so this school year, we are continuing with our science lead teacher monthly meetings. We continue implementing the 2 lessons per grade level in grades K through 5. We're also going to select and recommend textbooks that align to the next generation science standards. And then we're also going to have our lead teachers and selected grade level teachers partake in an early implementation of those materials that are recommended to the board, and that'll take place in the spring. And that'll provide us with some information for the following year prior to full-scale implementation. So who exactly participates on the K-5 textbook adoption committee? So we have lead teachers representing.
Before you go any further, can you explain what is a shift?
A shift, like a change, essentially, a change in instruction. For example, instead of the teacher standing in front of the students simply showing them how to do an experiment, the students are the ones actually engaging in the experiment, manipulating the models, making sense of it. It's more student-centered, so that would be an example of a shift or an instructional change, how instruction looks different.
Thank you.
So in terms of who participates on the committee, we have all of our lead teachers representing all of our K-5 schools, including Hollydale and Jackson. We have all grade levels represented, K-5, and we also have representation from our teachers union, Teachers Association. And this is just an idea of who's on the committee in terms of the members, their assignments, their grade level assignment, and the schools that they represent. So this is kind of a timeline, and we actually have our first lead teacher meeting tomorrow, so we're anxious to get started with our lead teachers. Over the next few meetings, we're really going to just develop their understanding of NGSS, continue to develop their understanding. And then as we move into October, we'll begin reviewing materials. The board adopted, California State Board adopted materials, and we're going to use a rubric and some criteria in order to evaluate those materials. And then the plan is to complete review of those materials in December, reach consensus on a textbook to then recommend to the Board of Education for adoption, and we hope to do that in January. And then in February, that's when we would have our lead teachers and selected grade level teachers do the early implementation to give us some input regarding the program. And then we'll solicit feedback on those lessons, also use that information to develop our instructional guides and plan our summer professional development. And then these are the materials that are, they're the materials that are comprehensive K-5 programs that have been adopted by the State Board of Education. So these are the programs that we'll begin reviewing. And so as I had shared, that we'll use the information from this year, the work of the lead teachers, the early implementation to inform our next steps. So the plan is in summer of 2020, we'll provide professional development in those instructional changes and the new textbook program, and also create curriculum guides or instructional guides for all grades K-5. So we're really excited about the work that we've done in K-5 science. We felt that we've really laid a solid foundation for what's coming, and we're confident that by adopting a new textbook, we'll give the teachers the resources that they need in order to provide instruction that's meaningful to students and that will cultivate a love for science and develop future scientists and engineers. Any questions?
No questions. Yes. I have a couple.
Sure.
Dr. Garcia stated in her presentation that non-diploma track students have an alternative curriculum called attainment. Are students in the non-diploma track supposed to have science like the Gen Ed students?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that question.
I can respond to that.
Okay, thank you.
The attainment curriculum actually is comprehensive. It addresses all content areas: language arts, math, science, social studies. It's a very integrated approach for the students who are on the life skills
Okay, so
curriculum.
so I guess, does the attainment curriculum have a science component? And the answer is yes. Okay.
It has all content areas, yes.
Okay. And if so, does the attainment lesson complement the lessons in the new K through 5 science textbooks?
Well, you have to keep in mind the attainment is it's a life skills curriculum, so it's a completely different curriculum because these students are on the non-diploma track because of their ability levels. So we have two different approaches in special education. One, we have a group of students, the majority of our students are on a diploma track program, and they use all the core materials. We have a very much smaller number of students who are non-diploma track because of their disabilities, and they use the attainment program.
Attainment, but it does have the science component in it.
Yes, but it would be different from this, as the math would be different and the language arts would be different. It's very life skills focused.
Okay.
Practical application to getting, to living each day.
So since the science has changed, has attainment also changed also? Has it, is it renewed or is it the same attainment that, because I know like for science textbooks, they're changing obviously. So is the attainment, are we going to keep the same attainment or are we looking into, okay, how do we address their needs, even though they're not on the diploma track, but do we get to change like we are doing for our general education students?
Well, we've had the attainment program only a few years, so it is very current, but we always look at what, every 5 to 7 years, we look at what is more current. The curriculum for students on the non-diploma track is, we don't have the same number of choices that we have that you saw up on the screen a few minutes ago. But when we reviewed all the options for this group of students, it was by far the strongest. But we will continue to look at current materials as they are released from publishers.
So does the attainment have a focus and a sequence plan?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It's a very strong approach.
And does it correspond to the new K through 5 lesson that will be presented to the Gen Ed students?
It's different content because it's focused more on life skills. So even as an example, the math. So we have the math would be focused more on money and counting money and how to make change, because this is a group of students that we want to have life skills. So the social studies component might be focused on how do you get around the community, how do you use a map, those kinds of things. It's very It's very much driven by how do we give these students the skills they need so they can become independent after they leave school.
But they will have the science
Yes.
component.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other comments?
I actually do have a question. You may have already answered it, so I do apologize. But what kind of questions or mindset does the adoption committee have when they're selecting a book or the curriculum?
We use a rubric that's provided. It's one of the options that's provided by the state. It's actually an NGSS collaborative called the TIME rubric. It's the Textbook Instructional Materials Equip rubric. And so we use that rubric to help the teachers. Well, first of all, we lay the foundation with respect to the changes, and then we have them become familiar with the rubric, and those changes or those shifts are reflected in the rubric so that we have a common understanding of what we're looking for, and then we evaluate each of those programs using the rubric.
Thank you.
Go through like a process of elimination, per se, to determine which is the best match for our students.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just have a question as far as I know we're getting new books and all districts are getting new books. But my question would be, because I know it's now student-centered, it's more activities, will the district also provide those hands-on activities that the teachers need? So often teachers, they look at their books, their lesson plans, and it's lovely, but then it's like they have to go by the materials so the kids could make more sense of it. So will we buy any type of like hands-on materials? I know this is like K through 5. I'm thinking of 7th graders and 8th graders and who are looking at like movement and force and friction. And there's teachers that buy different equipment and they have the kids strap on like a parachute and they run and they go, okay, see how the wind is giving you like this friction and you can't go as fast and what have you. But it's teachers themselves purchasing materials. Is a district looking into more hands-on activities that they could use? I'm looking at this picture and you're looking at tubes and whatnot. I mean, will we provide what teachers need? Will we ask teachers, or is it going to be just more paper, pencil kind of activity, consumable books? It's just more. I'm thinking, is it more just centered as for the student, or is it more them building and what would they need?
Well, I can speak to what we did with the middle school. With the middle school program that we recently adopted, we also purchased science kits that were recommended as part of the textbook adoption. So we did purchase those for the teachers so that they wouldn't have to go find those materials on their own. And then we do work with the schools to help the lead teachers normally like conduct an inventory to see what materials they currently have at their schools. And then down the road, it becomes the responsibility of the schools to purchase the materials, like the refill information, but we work collaboratively with the schools. But yes, it's important. If students are going to approach science differently, the teachers and the students need to have the tools in order to do so.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Morales. Our next presentation is on our math initiatives in K12 that were implemented to address the need for increased math success.
All right, I'm going to actually start off that presentation for us tonight.
Okay. As she is getting ready, board members, I believe someone asked at the last board meeting to see, or the last study session, to see an example of a curriculum for the transitional students. So I'll make sure that we send that home with the Wednesday report for you all to look at.
Thank you.
So now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about our K12 Mathematics Initiatives. So the purpose of my presentation is to provide an update on how math instruction has changed to focus on mathematical thinking and understanding in both the elementary and the middle school. And then you'll see how this connects to the work that's being done at the high school as well. So how is math instruction different in a K-8 classroom? So traditionally, classroom instruction involved the teacher standing in front of the classroom, showing students a series of steps or procedures, and then students were expected to imitate those symbolic manipulations. And even though the students didn't have really an understanding of what they were doing, they were just simply following the steps that the teacher told them to follow. So essentially, we were telling kids how to think about math. This is my thinking, step 1, step 2, step 3, now you try. That's very different from how we teach math today. So students work collaboratively to problem solve and make sense of problems. They use manipulatives and models to model real life problems, real mathematical problems. Students collaborate to problem solve and think critically together, critique each other's reasoning, share their thinking with their classmates, either in small groups, partner work, or also with the whole class. And students also present their thinking to the class. The teacher's role is very different. It's more as a facilitator, so it is very student-centered. So the direct instruction, that traditional classroom, the teacher standing in front of the classroom, it's now the student standing in front of the classroom, and the teacher is standing to the side posing questions of the whole class in relation to that student's thinking. So how do you think so-and-so approached this problem? How do you think they solved the problem? How do you think they counted them? The questions are being directed to the whole class. So it's really engaging the class in that shared reasoning, that collective reasoning, and engaging with the students' thinking. So it's a very different approach from traditional math instruction. And so with the Common Core standards, what's unique is that there are 2 sets of standards. We have our content standards, which are our grade level K-8 standards, and these are those standards. This is like the math. So like multiplication, use of variables, understanding geometry, geometric shapes. And then what's unique about the standards are the practice standards. These are the standards that address the habits of mind that foster that mathematical thinking. These are the behaviors similar to what we saw with the science standards, the science and engineering practices. These are the math practice standards. So these are the standards that we want our students to engage in just as if they were mathematicians. Some of those habits of mind may include persevering in problem solving, critiquing each other's reasoning, constructing viable arguments, contextualizing, decontextualizing, being able to work back and forth between numbers and words, finding patterns, making generalizations. So really engaging with the content as a mathematician does to make sense of their world. And so in light of these shifts and these changes, if we want students to engage in the standards of mathematical practice, develop those habits of mind, and engage in critical and analytical thinking, we have to adopt how we teach, right? So just wanted to give you some examples of how we're supporting these new ways of teaching through our curriculum and our instruction. So classroom instruction needs to look different. The instructional resources that we provide to our teachers need to look different. They need to promote that inquiry and that problem solving, that student-centered curriculum. We also include technology in our instructional guides. So we have hyperlinked resources that can be used both by teachers and students. Some of them include lessons, some include tasks, activities, videos that students can engage with. Students at both the elementary and the middle school level have the opportunity to participate in ST Math, which is a web-based program that develops students' conceptual understanding through problem solving. It's a visual program. So we've been implementing, I believe this is our 6th year implementing K5. And then this year at the middle school, we've expanded a pilot that we started kind of midway through the year last year. And we have teachers, interested teachers participating in that program at the middle school level as well. So we're excited to learn about their progress and get their feedback so we can see about the possibility of maybe expanding that next year. And then at Jackson School, 6th grade, our curriculum specialist, our middle school curriculum specialist, Maria Hughes, is working with teachers to help develop a thinking classroom. So this is unique in that generally the first 3 to 4 weeks of school, they don't even get to their content, their grade level content. It's more about establishing a culture in their classroom for thinking. So students engage in real problem-solving tasks. They're really just creating that culture that we're going to learn together, we're going to problem solve, and that's the focus. And then they use that to attack problems that pertain to their grade level standards. And so there's a lot of co-planning, co-teaching, debriefing, revising. It's like essentially it's inquiry taking place at the classroom level, learning together. So those are some of the ways that we're supporting the new ways of teaching at both the elementary and the middle school. And in order to change how we teach, we need to provide teachers with the support that they need, the professional development to help make these changes. So we're in our 3rd year of professional development on cognitively guided instruction in grades K through 5. We have over 150 teachers trained in CGI. And essentially, CGI is a student-centered approach. It's really based on the study of thousands of students and how students inherently or naturally approach problems. And then the idea is that teachers analyze this and help make sense of the students' mathematical thinking, and then use this as a springboard for planning their instruction, guiding their instruction, informing their instruction. And then we've also provided professional development over the last few years for our middle school math teachers. They've come to math institutes where they've learned about some of these shifts as well. This year we also did Teacher Lab, where our K-5, this was in order to support the implementation of CGI, where our K-5 teacher teams came together, and they actually brought student work, and we spent a significant amount of time analyzing the student work, placing it along a trajectory, that progression that students naturally follow, and really help them see how they can use the analysis of that data, of that student work, to help plan for instruction, whether that's planning for something the next day or planning questions to help support students' thinking, extend their thinking. So that's been really, really powerful because it's their student work. We also offered this past summer an online course called Foundation of Fractions, which was completed by over 25 teachers. And this was essentially to help teachers learn about different ways of teaching that's a little more conceptual versus just teaching procedures, allowing students to, because we know that fractions is they're difficult concepts for students to grasp, and it's difficult for teachers to teach, making sense of that. And so we've gotten really positive feedback from the teachers regarding that course content, so that's exciting. We'll continue to provide some ongoing professional development throughout the school year to support that as well. And then at all of our middle schools, they've been doing a math lesson study. So this is essentially classroom inquiry. The teachers come together, they plan a lesson, they teach the lesson, they observe each other, and then they make revisions to the lesson itself based on student evidence that they collect that's in alignment with whatever learning goal they're targeting that day. So it's very powerful because they're really looking at the student work and determining what worked, what didn't work, and what are we going to do differently. And then the next teacher teaches it the next period, making those adjustments. So it's like the lesson evolves over the course of that day. That's very powerful. Okay. So we feel really good about the work that we've done in K-8 math, and we feel that it aligns very well to the work that's being done at the high school as far as fostering that love of mathematics and hopefully creating opportunities for students to engage in that mathematical thinking. So with that,
Good evening, President Gomez, Superintendent Perez, members of the board, as well as our executive cabinet and all of our guests, which are mostly district staff and our TAP president. Hello, everybody. So before we get started, just a couple quick things to point out. Dr. Francois is on baby watch, so if you see him run out of here, that's because he has a baby due at some point in the very near future. And before, I'm going to introduce our math curriculum specialist, Leo Gonzalez. In fact, I'll do that now. Leo is, this is your 3rd year, I believe. supporting high school mathematics. And I think this is Leo's first ever board presentation. Is that correct? So he's a little bit nervous. But I know it's going to go well. And one thing I wanted to share about Leo is last week his family found out that they were going to be adopting their fourth child, and so that's really cool. Yeah, so we're really excited. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? We're really excited, and we're going to kind of tag team this part of our presentation. We're really excited to share some of the work that we're doing in mathematics in our high school classrooms. And so we're just going to start by kind of sharing a little bit about some work we're doing around instruction specifically, and then talk about some specific initiatives, in particular Carnegie Learning, which we're trying to use to support students who have traditionally struggled in mathematics. And we're also going to talk about our initiative to implement coding into the mathematics classroom through a unique partnership with a group called TechSmart that came on our radar through a connection with Dr. Perez, and we're real excited about that. There's some outstanding work. So let's go ahead and start with the work that we're doing with Teachers Development Group. So this is actually our K-8 lead-in was really perfect because a lot of the work that Kelly described that's happening around cognitively guided instruction in our K-8 classrooms translates really well to the work that we're trying to engage in high school. And I think that over the years, as we build a strong continuum, meaning a foundation at the K-5 level, refining at the middle school level, and then continuing that work at the high school level, we're going to have a real powerful mathematical learning experience for students that kind of breaks the traditional mold, so to speak, of what most of us probably remember math instruction to look like. And typically, if you remember back to your high school days, teacher showed you how to do something, might have given you a sample problem or two, and then said, all right, you have 1 through 35 odd, off you go. And then you do it and you come back and repeat. So the work that we're trying to do in our instruction in our classrooms, especially around math, is to make it way more interactive, make it way more engaging, more problem solving, problem oriented, and make the mathematics more relevant and meaningful. And so this is where our friends from Teachers Development Group come in. So we've been working now with Teachers Development Group for a little bit over 2 years. And they came onto our radar through our friends at Odyssey STEM Academy as we were attempting to rethink what high school could look like, in particular instruction. Mr. Nuthall turned us onto a group that he's had quite a bit of success with. And so we got together with the Teachers Development Group, and it's been a really strong partnership, and we're excited to see the work continue and expand across our math teams. And we're going to go into what they do and what they emphasize, and we're also going to go into what the process looks like specifically. Good math professional development and support is hard to find. It's even harder to find at the high school level. Typically when you see people out there that support work in math, it usually is around elementary school and middle school. Finding a group that really focuses in specifically on supporting high school mathematics instruction is rare. And so we found a great partner in Teachers Development Group. So to give you a little bit of background, we have partnerships. Our partnership with TDG essentially is across all of our high schools. So we have teams at West in algebra and geometry. Our senior high school campus has geometry, algebra 2, and pre-calculus. Odyssey has support for their integrated math program. And then CDS in Buena Vista has additional support as well through our partnership with TDG. And essentially what happens is our teachers go through to start what's called a best practices in teaching mathematics workshop. Generally, it's a 3 to 4 day workshop where the teachers do hands-on learning activities around how to ultimately generalize and summarize mathematics and how to get students to that point. And they talk about the mathematical habits of interaction and the mathematical habits of mind and what that looks like in a high school classroom. We also, in our partnership with TDG, have provided support for our mathematics coaches. That's something that's new for this year. Our mathematics coaches at our high schools have been part of the work with TDG since the beginning. So when we first started with them with our small pilot, which included our department chairs and teacher leaders, we had our coaches involved, and they've been involved every step of the way. This year, we wanted to provide some specific support for them on how to further enhance their abilities and skills as coaches to be able to give feedback to teachers in a non-threatening way that helps their teachers get better and continue to improve. And then we also, in this work, have 3 studio cycles for each team. We're going to go through in a couple of slides what a studio cycle kind of looks like, so you have a sense for what that work is all about.
Good evening. And so just to get into more into the work with TDG, what we target is the main goal is to generalize and justify in math. And so when I first heard that, I was wondering, well, what does that mean? And so the justification refers to, okay, so you've solved this equation and you shifted this term over to the other side of the equation, but why did you do that? And if you set up an equation, what allows you to set up that equation? And so it's not just following a process. There has to be some thought and just justification behind it. The generalization piece is referring to, okay, yeah, we've solved 10 problems today in class. How are we going to transfer this to some other problem the next day or the next week? How are you going to be able to apply this? And so when we plan our lessons with our teachers, we keep that in mind. It's not just, oh, I'm teaching section 2.3 out of the textbook. It's what's the core math idea and what are the kids going to walk away and generalize out of this lesson. And so Kelly was talking about the math practices and referring to the habits of mind. And so we also are targeting those same habits. And so we break it down into even more detail, habits of interaction. And so these are habits that if you walk into a classroom, these are habits that you can see. Students challenging each other, explaining their reasoning, being given private reasoning time. And what this all works towards the habits that are in the middle, and those are the habits of mind. And so that's where the students are making connections across an equation and a graph and a verbal form of the problem. And so, but all of this is intended to yield the generalization and the justification. So when we go to a classroom, this is the diagram that we're working off of, and the same thing that we're working off of when we're planning. And so as the teacher, okay, yeah, we can tell you we want to see these habits of interaction. We want to see the students develop the habits of mind. How do you make it happen? It doesn't just magically happen. And so the teaching routines that you implement in your classroom have to be geared toward creating that. And so one of our big targets is structuring worthwhile student talk. And so in this position, I've been fortunate enough to visit many classrooms, and I've seen teachers say, "Turn and talk to your partner," and sometimes there's nothing because they've got nothing to say or they don't know or what to say. And so when we refer to structured student talk, what that means is I'm going to share with you what my thinking is, and your job is to listen, and your responsibility is then to revoice what you understood, and then I have a chance to clarify. And that way everybody's talking and everybody's listening and everybody's making sense. And so Dr. Smith referred to the studio cycle, and I'll let him start.
Yeah, this is a similar process to what Kelly shared when she discussed lesson study. And this is really the most powerful part of the professional development that we're involved in with TDG, because essentially it takes our teachers and our coaches and as well as our administrators through a pretty powerful cycle of teaching and learning mathematics and learning and collaborating with one another. And so Leo is going to talk a little bit about what each of the day entails. But this process is really important. And in fact, we actually have this process scheduled to start tomorrow at PHS West, which we're real excited about the next cycle. And so again, we're going to get into the details of each day. So why don't we go through that?
So we currently have one studio going on at Odyssey. Today was day one. Tomorrow is the actual studio lesson, and then West is to follow. And we have studios set up for several senior campus teams. Every teacher on campus is participating in a studio. And so I run the studios for CDS in Buena Vista. Day one consists of visiting some classrooms, gathering data just to see where the school is, where the instruction is at the moment. We call them a data snap. And so there's some leadership coaching where the consultant works with administration. The second half of that day is planning the studio lesson with the studio teacher. So for example, at West Campus, our studio teacher is, can I share his name? Is Mr. Almada. So we will be planning a studio lesson with him for the second part of the day. When I say we, it's me, the consultant, the coach, and the teacher. And so that would be day one. Day two is the studio lesson. So the entire team comes together. We work through the lesson. We work through the math. And when I say we work through the math, we're working through it, thinking about, okay, what questions are going to come up? How are the students going to interact with this problem? And so once we work through the lesson, then we see it enacted. Everybody goes in and observes, and the focus is gathering data. What are we seeing, and what are we listening to? And so this is one of the big components to TDG is Teacher Development Group is it's data driven. So this is not, oh, I really liked what I saw there, or I think that was a good idea. This is merely based on what took place in the classroom, what we observed. And so once the lesson is enacted, we come back and debrief it. The team, talks about, okay, well, what can we take back to our own classroom? And so teachers then determine what their next steps are. So the studio teacher, they had their chance. They had their opportunity, and they taught their lesson and received feedback. But then what about everybody else? It's not a spectator sport, and so everybody gets their opportunity. Every teacher has their opportunity for their own studio lesson in a smaller scale, okay? Where the coach, myself, and I and the teacher plan the lesson, their own lesson, and then we go and observe and coach. That's another big part of this. Is one thing that was kind of difficult for me at the beginning is it's in the moment coaching, and so it's during the lesson. You as a coach can approach the teacher and ask questions. How do you feel this lesson's going? Where do you want to go next? What do you think of trying this or trying that? And so you can adjust your lesson in that moment. I've been I was in the classroom for 17 years and was observed many times, and so it's very difficult to get that feedback after the fact. The lesson's done. If you had shared that with me in the moment, I think I would have had a better chance of making that adjustment. And so we provide that for the teacher. And so and we also do a debrief after that. And so this follow-up, because we have so many teachers as part of these studios, this will be like the next couple of weeks after the studio.
The other initiative that we wanted to share with you was the work that we've been engaged in with Carnegie Learning. And this specifically has been taking place at both West and Senior Campus with our algebra and geometry classes. And the purpose of our partnership with Carnegie Learning was to identify a way to provide support to students that have traditionally or have been identified as potentially struggling in high school mathematics. And in particular, we were interested in trying something that used a blended learning format, which I'll talk about right now. Essentially, a blended learning approach is one that integrates technology into the teaching of mathematics in a fluid manner, but that technology also personalizes the learning for that particular student. And so we're going to share a little bit about how Carnegie's program and through its software called Mathia does that in a moment. And you'll actually get to see a short video that kind of describes it and kind of brings that part to life, and then we can talk a little bit more about it. But essentially, Carnegie's approach to instruction is teacher-facilitated problem solving. So as opposed to, again, kind of a traditional rote method of here's a concept, here's a couple of examples, you go ahead and try a couple, and then off you go. Carnegie frames all of its work around true problem-centered work that requires students to really reach into their mathematics tool bag, so to speak, and identify the best way to solve a particular problem and work through that particular piece with the habits of mind and the habits of interaction embedded. The Mathia software is a component that is meant to build the skills that the student might be struggling in behind the scenes. So for example, we have students in Algebra 1 that have deficiencies in their math knowledge for one reason or the other. They didn't get the content, something way back in 5th or 6th grade that they didn't understand that never got addressed, and the issue continued to snowball and snowball and snowball, and then it manifests itself in an algebra course. Traditionally, you wouldn't necessarily know that that's a specific problem for that specific student unless you really knew the student well and you really knew the standards well and connected the two together. And that's difficult to do, especially on scale. You know, if you have 150, 160, 170 students in your math classes, knowing that for each and every student is very difficult. And so sometimes what teachers are forced to do is say, well, I offer help, I offer support, I offer tutoring, come to tutoring. And all of those things can be helpful, but they oftentimes don't address the root cause or the root issue. The Carnegie software Mathia is meant to specifically address that. It hones in on what the specific skill or standard is that a student is deficient in, gives practice, gives assessment, gives help and support until the student's able to demonstrate mastery. And sometimes that doesn't align with the actual work that the student is doing that particular day in geometry, and that's okay. The two will eventually come together, but we have to make sure that we're addressing what those needs are on a one-to-one personalized basis as much as possible. And again, we're going to share more about that. Our partnership with Carnegie also provides plenty of support from our consultants. They come out and offer quite a bit of coaching throughout the year. I believe we're quarterly at this point. We also do some work with them in the summer. And as I mentioned, Carnegie's right now is supporting Algebra 1 and Geometry at the senior campus. I'd like to share one more thing before Leo kind of gets into kind of what Carnegie looks like as well as the Mathia software. Traditionally, when students have struggled in math, districts, including ours, have generally taken an approach where let's give students more mathematics. So let's go from 1 period to 2 periods. We'll give you a double block, sometimes it's been called. Other approaches have been, let's take the math courses that really should take no more than a year to complete, and let's make them 2-year courses. So you can take, instead of a year of algebra, you take 2 years of algebra. Instead of 1 year of geometry, you take 2 years of geometry. Typically, all of those approaches really don't yield too much fruit in terms of success. Typically, when it comes to students that don't like mathematics or haven't been successful, it makes it worse, typically. And the results in terms of success are, generally speaking, few and far between. So wanting to break from that mold and try something different is the reason that we decided to start trying Carnegie and to start trying an approach that actually uses the blended learning format. So this way we can accomplish our goals with helping students get caught up and continue to be successful in math, or in some cases be successful for the first time in math.
So this is a page out of the geometry Carnegie text. It's a consumable text. And the reason I chose this problem is because this is what the students encounter first when they start learning about quadrilaterals. I've taught geometry, and the traditional geometry course doesn't start this way. You know, at least not the unit on quadrilaterals. Usually you start with the properties and the definitions and just the basics. And this is the sort of problem that you encounter at the end of the chapter, when all of the skills are in place. And so Carnegie takes a different approach, and this is what we hit them with first. Is this quadrilateral that you're looking at, is it a square? And a lot of kids are coming to us from middle school with some of these skills already in place. And so some of them may already know how to respond to a question like this. And so the purpose of a task like this is to bring that knowledge to the surface and adjust your instruction based on that. Maybe they don't need you to start back at square one. Maybe you meet them where they are, and you can take off from there. By challenging the students with a task like this, you create a need, right? You create, most of the time they won't be able to solve something like this or prove it, but at least you've created that need for those properties and those definitions that are going to come later. Some of the problems are tough. Some of the problems are tough, but that's by design. And so our teachers, we have some very strong teachers in these classrooms that are guiding these students through these tasks. Mathia I chose this task, and in this task, the students are asked to name a part of this diagram. And most of the time, this happens on paper. And so the power here is that the students have to interact with this problem online, just the same way they take that SBAC. And so when they take that SBAC, they have to type in equations, and they have to name objects. And so what we don't want is our students to have that first encounter with that on the Smarter Balance assessment. So I think this sort of practice is going to pay off down the line.
There's many different variations of math software out there, but they miss the mark of it. What students really need is software that gives them guidance.
It's easy to tell a student what they got wrong. It's harder to determine and tell them why they got it wrong. And our software does just that.
Our goal at Carnegie Learning is that we produce kids that learn how to think. The features of the software provides them those opportunities to become that self-directed learner. We're not just picking problems with a prompt and a final answer box. We are really mimicking what a real teacher does teaching.
As you look at the hints and the just-in-time feedback, they're getting 45 minutes of one-on-one guided instruction in a way that a human would talk about.
Kids can work at their own pace. As they work, the system is collecting data. You suddenly have insights that you've never dreamed of. There's a whole bunch of fine-grained steps that the student needs to take, and that all of those steps are important to the final answer.
By tracking student interactions as they go step by step through the problem, we get the sort of information that a human tutor would have in a one-on-one interaction with the student, and to constantly learn about how it is that they're learning.
Not only will you know how many problems they're doing and how many workspaces they're working through, but you'll know data about whether your students are going to be successful at the end of the year.
District administrators and superintendents become predictive throughout the entire school year, and they're not surprised at the end when test scores come out. Rather than, for example, taking a test, teachers are going to have immediate feedback, real-time information about where everyone is. Well, that information should inform them what goes on in the classroom. And then they can make decisions about how to group kids together based on that data.
The whole idea of to provide the teachers the support they need so that they have the time to spend with individual students that need their time.
For students that might be afraid to raise their hand in class, you put them in front of this software, all that's gone. They can ask for help. Nobody knows. It's just the student and a powerful piece of software.
So as Dr. Smith mentioned, Mathia doesn't necessarily, what you're doing in Mathia doesn't necessarily match what you did out of your textbook earlier in the day. But that's by design, right? And that's by design. And so if there were those gaps, Mathia's job is to wrap around, come back around, and try to help you fill those gaps. Currently, our two math teams, our two Carnegie teams, they have a goal of 60 minutes on Mathia per week, and we've made very good progress on this. One, there are a lot of tools, that help the teacher monitor in class. We have a live lab, it's called, which is a tool where the teacher can, on their computer screen, they can see who's struggling and who's moving along at a good pace, and so that way the teacher can go and sit with that student that needs a little bit of help.
So the last piece that we wanted to share was a little bit of information about the initiative that we have around implementing and embedding coding into our Algebra 1 classes. This is a unique partnership. Dr. Perez connected us with a gentleman from a group called TechSmart, and I believe that they were recommended to us from Alice or CALSA. It was one of those two organizations. And so I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to sit down with the gentleman from there. Because initially, Bruce is his name, he's the owner and founder, and they're in several school districts across the United States. The initial discussion was, hey, we have some great coding classes that you can offer to students. And I was interested in that because we'll talk a little bit about the need for coding, but we have some coding options for kids. We have classes in computer science that address coding. What I was more interested in is how can we ensure that students have equity when it comes to a coding experience? And by equity, that means everyone has the ability to learn some dimension or some aspect of coding. The other objective that we set out for in our discussion was how do we address that growing demand, but then also connect it to a subject matter that every student takes. And Algebra 1 came to mind. I was a math major. I taught high school mathematics like Leo did. I almost went pretty close to having a minor in computer science. In fact, I almost switched my major. So I know inherently the connection between the two. And one thing that didn't exist until not too long ago was an actual algebra curriculum that infused and married both and used coding as a vehicle to teach algebra. And so what we did was we sat down and discussed some of those objectives, and Bruce from TechSmart kind of went away and said, well, let me think about that. And then he came back to us and said, hey, let's work together on building it. And that's exactly what we've done. So we're together with kind of a coalition of the willing, so to speak, at PHS and initially, or PHS West and also at PHS Senior. But now we're focused at PHS specifically, PHS West rather. We've been working hand in hand to build what this curriculum and what this support can look like. And it's really exciting, and we're going to give you a little bit of a taste of that. Our friends from TechSmart have realized that our teachers are not computer programmers. And so what they do is they make the teaching of how to teach computer science, in other words, coding specifically, as easy as possible. So they put our teachers all through a coding boot camp. They provide coaching days, and literally there's 24-hour phone support, email support, video support. They're pretty responsive to us because this is a partnership that we're really working on together. Our very first year, what we accomplished was teaching coding alongside the algebra. That wasn't good enough. So we didn't want coding. Remember, when we set out, we wanted to marry the two. So we didn't want coding to be a separate thing from the algebra. And so in year one, there were some growing pains and some bumps around that. Year two, we're really looking at a more integrated approach. And we're going to give you an example of what that looks like. And the evolution is really based on the feedback from our teachers and the direct input from Leo, the teacher team, and some other districts that have caught some, this has caught their attention as well. Covina, I think it's Covina Unified, is also doing this in collaboration with us as well. One of the things that always comes up is why should we provide some equity around coding? What I wanted to share with you is this list here of the fastest growing occupations in the United States of America through 2028. So these are projections that come from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And you'll see all kinds of jobs that appear on this particular list. But in particular, there's a handful of them that appear, 4 of them specifically, that all require some kind of computer programming or coding acumen. So you'll see information security analysts, statisticians, operation research analysts, and software developers. So when you look at this list, 4 of the key jobs on the list require some type of coding. But it gets a little deeper than that. When you also take a look at what they pay, if I were to resort this list, those 4 rise directly to the top. So they're not only growing, they also pay extremely well. And so what we're after is trying to give our students some type of background and some type of experience that hopefully over time we can continue to sustain it so our students leave us with this skill, which will help ensure that they're career ready, which is part of our promise, college and career ready students and graduates.
So I'm pretty excited to be part of something like this. When Dr. Smith first approached me about this idea, I wasn't 100% on board. I was, well, how are we going to do that? I didn't see that merging of the curriculums. But as I've dug into the coding and how it can work with Algebra 1, it's amazing how well they can work together. And so year one was bumpy. It was bumpy because the programs were not merged. And so, today on Monday, I was teaching, the teacher was teaching systems of equations. And then the next day they were teaching some random coding skill that had absolutely zero connection. And so our students questioned it, and they had reason to question that. what does this have to do with what you taught me yesterday? And so we went back to the drawing board over the summer, and we created an integrated program where the coding supports the Algebra 1. Algebra 1 is first, and coding comes second. And so, this is a snapshot of a 4-day span, where the blue blocks are the coding pieces, and the white is the algebra instruction. And so you'll see the blue blocks, they are directly related to whatever instruction is taking place at that time. And so, so for example, the students might be solving linear equations, collecting like terms. Well, the coding piece will target the same skill and the same standard. To give you a little more detail on what the different activities are, we have 3 different coding activities. The first one is called the math app, and so in a math app, the students are interacting with a program that has already been coded, has already been written for them. So they run it, and this program will generate math problems for them. And so they solve these problems. And so the next day, it's called code building, where they're given a skeleton of that same program, and they then have to fill it in. They have to code the math pieces of that program. The third type of activity is called the coding challenge, which is a short program that they designed for them to take from beginning to end. And so this cycles again and again. So it's a math app, code building, where they code that same program, and then a coding challenge where they take it from beginning to end. The activities that TechSmart's making for us, sometimes it can be very exciting. Coding can take you to lots of places, but we insist that every single coding activity targets a math standard and directly supports our algebra curriculum. And so behind every coding activity, you can see the math standards that are being addressed, as well as the coding targets. Here's an example of a math app. This is in the middle of solving linear equations, where students have to collect like terms on both sides. So students are presented with the images, and they have to translate that into an equation. And so what they do is they solve it step by step, and as the program is running, it's guiding them through this problem. So this is the math app. So this is sometimes on a worksheet. You can put our teachers sometimes push it out in the form of a Google Doc, and students can write on their Chromebook screens. And so this is the math app portion. The next day, they encounter the code building piece. So on the left is just the skeleton of the code, and there's a lot of text there. And what that text that's the instruction. So it's telling the student, write this expression that will add or subtract these 2 variables. And so the finished product is what you see on the right. You'll notice the little circles, little beacons on the far left. Those are little hint beacons, and so these are tailor-made for us. When a student clicks on that, they'll have a hint that will help them get through that line of code. I have to be honest. Like I said, I'm very excited about this. TechSmart has shared with me that there are lots of districts watching us to see how this program progresses, and I think a lot of those districts are ready to jump on board. Yes, they're gonna come in for once the product is finished, but I think we're fortunate that even though we're experiencing the bumps, we're fortunate because we're building this, and so they are custom making this program for us. We tell them we want a program for quadratic formula. We want a program for the discriminant. We want a program that's going to help solve a system of equations. And so it's pretty exciting to have that kind of a say.
So we can attempt to answer any questions that you might have.
And you wouldn't. Come on. You did it. Great job.
I have a question. In the last study session, Dr. Garcia's presentation showed that non-diploma track students have an alternative curriculum that focuses on life skills and that student success is largely met by reaching IEP and objectives. A couple of times, Dr. Garcia referred to the non-diploma track students engaging in real-life math lessons such as grocery shopping and balancing checkbooks. So what is our district plan to measure these success and increase math success for non-diploma track students? It seems like we should have some way to measuring, monitoring, and reporting what these students have been working on and looking at ways that we can help them improve not only in math, but in all the relative life skills subject areas. So specifically since we have them from 18 years to 22 years.
Would you like to address it from a special ed perspective, or?
That might be a good place to
I
start.
can give some general information. And again, for that group of students, their progress is measured through their IEP goals with their annual and their triannual IEP meetings that they have with the team, and whether or not how they're progressing on those goals. They're assessed on on an annual basis, and their goals are adjusted as a result of assessments and as a result of the IEP team meetings.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question, Dr. Smith, related to this. So I'm just as excited as you guys are, but as a teacher, how much are the coding activities weighted on student grades? Like kind of a breakdown of that?
The coding activities are not included in their math grade. That's the last thing we want is to have to have a student fail because of the coding. And so that's not the coding is just there to support. And so teachers can be creative with how they want to assess it, but it's not to be part of their grade.
Yeah, we see the coding aspect to be really more analogous to a teaching strategy. So it's the strategy we're using to help enhance and teach the mathematics. And the students, if you go and you visit, the students respond to it pretty well. They like it, especially when they run the programs. This particular program about the rocks on each side, Leo gave a very great example, solving a linear equation with variables on both sides of the equation, pretty typical standard math problem. But the fact that they go through and run some experiments using the software, translate that into the mathematics, and then have to think about how they would code that, in other words, put it into a language, is a skill that connects the habits of mind, what they're trying to do with mathematics, trying to make meaning of it, and with the very real concepts of being able to do it operationally. And so it's pretty exciting. And then there's others just like it. There was the other activity where it's the distance formula, essentially. And so the activity is, can the soccer goalie stop the soccer ball? So can you guess how long it'll take for the kick to make it to the goal? And all the mathematics behind it, and then ultimately the coding behind it as well. So it's a pretty powerful learning experience.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to clarify the algebra with coding. This is the second year.
Correct.
Okay. So I understand there's algebra 1, and so then there's algebra with coding. So do they get the same credit as algebra 1? Like what would determine a student, like for a counselor to say, hey, you could take this avenue, take algebra with coding versus just algebra 1?
Please allow me to clarify. There is no algebra with coding. There's an algebra 1 course at the high school. So the content of the course really isn't any different. So an algebra 1 course at the high school is an algebra 1 course at the high school. What we've done with some specific sections of algebra 1 is embed the coding aspect into it, because that's where our teachers happen to be. In this case at West, it's a co-taught course. So
it's two co-teaching teams.
So we have two co-teaching teams, so we are able to provide the experience to some of our students with disabilities. We also have a connection with our computer science program. So we have students that are taking an actual class in computer science, and so some of those students are in those sections as well. We started small intentionally, so we didn't just say all Algebra 1 is going to have coding embedded into it. And the reason for that was this is completely brand new and doesn't exist. So we're literally creating it along with our partners from TechSmart. So we figured being taking a cautious yet extremely optimistic approach would be the right one for that. So this way you don't just roll something out on scale and it blows up. So we have some real dedicated teacher teams that have been a part of this work from the beginning. And assuming that we continue to be successful, we would certainly like to expand that and broaden that to include all students coming in. Back to the objective, which was equity. We really see this in the long term as an equitable solution to ensure all students have a coding experience. And there's also other subject matters where this could extend to. So there's coding aspects can be applied into the sciences pretty easily as well, biology and chemistry specifically, even physics.
I really like the fact that we're renovating or changing up math because there's a lot of students that hate math, unfortunately. But once you do it, you learn to love it. I know I do. And the one thing that I'm concerned is for students with special needs, as far as, yes, it's nice to have, reinvent and add different components to math, but what are we doing now for special education? And I know that's not something that you're more aware of. That's more Dr. Stark. So, and I'm asking because our members of the community who have children with special needs feel like they're left behind. They've come here and they've stated that they don't feel part of the family, and we need to make all students feel part of the family, and that we're showing that, yes, we do have now a math program, not, of course, the ST Math or the other math program that you have, but something that would help our students that need more of the life skills. So that's where I'm coming from, my concerns.
If I could just address that briefly, we share that concern. And so the work that we've done specifically at the high school level, but also speaking broader when you look at what's the work being done in our middle schools to increase access to the general ed curriculum to the greatest extent possible for students with disabilities, really is key and important work. So, for example, with the coding pilot, we intentionally picked our co-teaching teams for a reason, because we think that this would be an engaging approach to teaching mathematics for any student. We know specifically that our students with disabilities would get a lot of benefit from that as well. And so we take that part very seriously. So the access to the core curriculum, the general ed curriculum, without going into self-contained classes is really important. And that's something we've committed to as a district for a few years now. And in particular, we embrace that at our high school. And you're right, making the mathematics more meaningful and engaging is really the key aspect that we're trying to address here. And so coding is one aspect of it. Some of the personalization, like you saw with Carnegie, is another. But also our approach in general to instructing mathematics, which is why our partnership with TDG is so important, that we get away from, again, the standard method of teaching mathematics that most of us in the room happen to go through when we were students.
I do have one more question. You mentioned that if the program is successful, how do you define successful? What is it? I mean, is there a percentage that we need to see raised for the students who are succeeding in algebra, or what is it? What's successful to you?
That's a really great question. And part of being so new is you get to kind of define some of those parameters. So one of the things that we'd like to see is that if we accomplished our objectives and we talk with students that have gone through the experience, they will give us positive feedback on how this approach to learning mathematics was different for them. So starting with the students first, I think is really important. We'd expect to hear some positive feedback from them about, yes, this was an enhancing approach. This was something we really liked, and feel we got something really positive out of it. The other piece that we'd expect to see are outcomes in terms of improved grades. So as engagement goes up, typically grades will follow. And then we also have some internal metrics on certain exams that we give. See, one of the things that's difficult about high school is that really when it comes to the state, there's one test that we give. And it only comes once every 4 years. And that actually happens to be in the junior year. And there's all kinds of conflicts with that because kids are also most focused on taking the SAT at that point and their AP exams and all these other things. So it becomes real difficult at the high school level to pick a certain assessment that will allow you to determine if a course or an action or program is successful. So in the case, but it's not impossible. So in the case of our courses that happen to fall freshman year, sophomore year, even senior year, we use other benchmarks and things like that. Some of those are internally developed. Some of those are resources that the state has made available for practice. So the SBAC exams have practice exams that we can use. So we'll be looking at some of those data as well. The third and final piece is talking with our teachers. You know, when we sat together with our teachers, the approach we took was, here's what we think, this is what we want to try, but we don't want to do it unless you're on board. I mean, that was literally the conversation. And then Leo and I went away and we heard back from the department and it was like, yeah, we want to give this a try. We got a few people in mind and away we went. So we think it's also really important because we're asking teachers to do something completely different. So their feedback on this is really important as well. So when you say, how are we going to judge success? It's really those three things that come to mind immediately for us to validate how we would want to do this moving forward.
And we look at that at the end of June, correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes. If not before, because some of that will start manifesting. So we don't need to wait till June to talk to kids about how they're feeling about the experience. So a month, 2 months, 3 months in during the first quarter, or even early second quarter, we can start kind of gauging what kind of feedback kids are getting. Certain data sets come in on unit exams, things like that. So we can start taking a peek at it. The reason that we've held off on that was, number one, last year it was brand new, literally building the planes, we're flying it. This year it's way better, it's way more integrated based on the feedback our teachers have given. So we think this year will give us a better snapshot of that.
Do you recall the contract, how long the contract is with Smart Tech?
We just renewed for the upcoming year. So right now it's on an annual basis. We didn't sign a multi-year contract with them. And part of the reason for that was intentional. I prefer not to sign a year-long thing, or I'm sorry, a multi-year approach to it, unless we really feel confident that it's moving in the right direction. And so far I do. But back to year one, it was a real risk. We didn't really know. And we thought it would be great, and it's becoming that, but it was a risk. So we didn't want to sign it, be locked into a 3 or 4 or 5 year deal.
Right. I just asked because the board usually approves it. So I'm a data person, so I would love to see the data on that.
Okay, of course.
Thank you. Any other questions or any comments? No. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Leo made it. Good job, Leo. Well done.
Our next presentation is by Dr. Stark, and it's on LCAP priorities, state priorities, and indicators.
The computer is tired after a long night. Okay, good evening, President Gomez, members of the board, and all of those who remain. It's our pleasure, and I'm working here with Renee Jeffrey this evening to talk a little bit about state priorities and local indicators in the LCAP. So a little bit of a change of pace from the topic of curriculum. The purpose for our presentation tonight is to give you some background on the 8 state priorities and what those mean, and also how state and local indicators in the LCAP address those priorities. And then we want to spend some time describing how the local indicators are reported to the state. So first of all, our LCAP, as every district in the state of California, outlines how districts will improve student outcomes by addressing 8 required state priorities. And those priorities are listed here, 1 through 8. And we'll be talking just a bit about about half of them, 5 of them, and I'll elaborate on that in just a minute. But before we get to those priorities, there are really 2 kinds of indicators. There are local indicators and state indicators. And districts are required to monitor their progress and report out on both types of indicators, state and local. So what are the difference between these 2? State indicators are measured through quantitative data. So when we report to you on test scores, those are state indicators. When we report to you on suspension rates, those are state indicators. And all of the indicators that are in the dashboard, or the majority of them, are state indicators. So test scores for language arts and math, suspension rates, the college and career readiness indicator, those are all at the state level. Local indicators are different. They are oriented more toward implementation progress rather than outcome. So they're set and reported locally for each district. And the reason they're called local is because every district determines what they are for themselves. Okay. So to give you a little bit more information about that, here's a table. And you can look at the 8 state priorities on the left. So as an example, basic conditions is how are we doing with teacher credentialing? How are we doing with textbook sufficiency? Are we giving textbooks to every student? And how are our facilities looking? Do we have adequate facilities? That is measured as a local indicator. All of the 5 checks you see on the right are all the indicators that are measured locally. Okay, the 3 X's on pupil achievement, pupil engagement, and outcomes on a broad course of study, those are all measured with state results.
Just a quick comment on hours. The check mark is not checked for parent and engagement.
Yeah, that was omitted. That was inadvertent. But Renee is going to talk about in detail about parent and community engagement. So what we're going to be talking with you about tonight are the 5 check topics, okay, and what those mean, because there's a report we have to complete by November 1st that addresses each of these 5 topics. So the reporting requirements for local indicators are, we can use either, there are two ways they're reported. They're reported using a narrative format or a self-reflection tool. And districts need to do 3 things. They need to measure their outcomes for their local indicators. In other words, how did we do? They need to report results at a regularly scheduled board meeting. And they need to upload the results in the dashboard, which is a digital platform, by November 1st of 2019. So if a district, including Paramount, meets those 3 requirements, then our local indicators are met. Okay, so last year was the first year we put these indicators in the dashboard, and if you looked in the dashboard right now, you would see all of our local indicators, and it would say met, because we met those 3 areas. We did those 3 things. So the first priority 1, is called basic conditions, and I mentioned that this is the priority that talks about, do we have sufficient facilities? Do we have teacher credentialing? Are our teachers credentialed properly? And do we have sufficient textbooks for every student? And for this indicator, we use the Williams report that we report to you. And that's what every district uses for this measure. The second priority is implementation of state standards. Now, earlier this evening, we heard about the standards for math. We heard about the standards for science. Those are the state standards. We also have standards for history, social science, and for language arts. And our LCAP includes extensive services and funding for professional development. And you heard Dr. Smith up here. You heard Kelly Morales talking about all the professional development we provide. Curriculum, assessment, and instructional materials. And all of those are in the LCAP to support how we implement the state standards so students can learn those standards. So in our plan, and this is our locally set indicator, we said we would measure how we're doing locally through the number of lead teachers who provide professional development support at our schools. So that's the number of lead teachers, and through the percentage of teachers who participate in professional development. So those were measures we determined. Now Renee is going to come up and talk about parent and family engagement because that indicator is measured a little bit differently this year as a result of some legislative changes.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Stark. So there have been some changes in parent and family engagement for priority 3. So I'll be doing a few more than just a one-slide overview. I'll be going over that. So first of all, our LCAP includes services for parent engagement, which includes our parent workshops, our parent classes. And the indicator measures how we seek input from parents in decision-making and promoting parent participation. And so this indicator is based on the percent of parents who complete a parent survey each year. Okay, and that's what we put for our goal and how we will measure it. Okay. So as Dr. Stark mentioned, there's new legislation on parent and family engagement, and every district is required to report in 3 areas. The first area is building relationships with schools and families. So do we have trusting and respectful relationships between the schools and the families? Do the schools know about families' strengths, about the various cultures, languages, and the goals for their children? Is there two-way communication where families understand what's happening at school and schools understand the families and their needs in their native language? The second area is building partnerships for student outcomes. Are we working together with our families to have the best possible scenario for our students? Are we providing families with resources to help student learning, resources to support the learning, and to help parents advocate for their students? And the final area is seeking input for decision making, and we see that in our advisory groups, as well as providing opportunities for families and parents to provide input and to help design, implement, and evaluate family engagement activities. So something else that is new, as Dr. Stark mentioned, we have 2 ways of measuring these priorities. So this year, for the first time, districts are actually required to complete a self-reflection tool for this particular priority. So this tool is used so that we can self-reflect on our practices related to parent and family engagement, and to identify areas of success, identify areas of need, as well as areas to work and grow in. Okay, so the goal of this is to use these outcomes from this new tool to plan and implement actions for our next LCAP. So we'll be using this tool to help us develop our LCAP in this area. And the tool uses a 5-point scale to self-assess the current status on those 3 areas: relationships, input, and the outcomes. And so we have a 5-point rubric right there, beginning with exploration and research phase. And that's just identifying there's a need there and researching how is it that we're going to meet that need. Beginning development might mean that we see the need and we found something that we want to implement, and maybe we're piloting that. Initial implementation means that we're just starting, we're getting off the ground. It's just past that pilot stage. It could be a particular group at a grade level. It could be a particular school across the board that we have implemented. Full implementation of 4 means that we have implemented across the district, okay? But we're still at that stage where if something were to happen, like if people were to leave, that it might not necessarily continue, okay? And that would be a 5, full implementation and sustainability. And that's always our goal, is to fully implement something that is successful, and then to have procedures and protocols in place so that we continue that practice, but we're also beyond just continuing, we're always continually improving, okay? So we don't just stay status quo. Priority 6.
Okay, and priority 6 is measuring school climate. So in our plan, we can have lots of services that promote safety and orderly school environments and support for school social emotional well-being. And you'll see some of them listed here. We've added extensive personnel to support students socially and emotionally, including social workers, behavior specialists, counselors. We have professional development, extensive professional development to assure that our schools are safe and orderly and positive places for children to learn, because we know it's not just about academics, it's also about how do kids feel when they're at school. And there are some programs listed here. All of our schools participate in Safe and Civil Schools. Several have gone full force into capturing kids' heart and restorative practices. And we have 2 programs launched and funded in the LCAP that connect kids to each other. And one of them, the middle school program, is called Where Everyone Belongs. It's shortened to WEB. And it's where 8th grade students become mentors and colleagues with 6th grade students, incoming 6th grade students, to get them to feel connected to other people at the school. And the high school has a very active Link Crew program, which is very similar between freshmen and upperclassmen. And as a result of providing all these services in the LCAP, we measure how students feel at school in terms of safety with a survey, a student survey that we issue each year. And we have a target for that for 5th grade, 7th grade, and 12th grade, and those are the grades of the students that we survey each year. The last goal is access to a broad course of study, and you may ask, what does that mean? And what that means is that all students have access to and are enrolled in a broad course of study. So earlier you heard Keith Nuttall talk about how all students have access to Odyssey, right? It's not just certain kids who can apply, everybody can apply, every 9th and 10th grade student. That's one example of how what access to a broad course of study is. In this indicator, we need to address 4 prompts in the narrative. We need to talk about how we monitor access to a broad course of study, the extent to which all students have access. So in middle schools, as an example, every middle school student has a language arts class, a math class, a science class, a social studies class. Any barriers that may prevent students from accessing a broad course of study, and then as a result of those barriers, any actions we plan to take to address those barriers. So it's not like you have to be perfect. You just have to say, what is your status, and what are your problems, and what's your plan to address your problems. So what happens next? Renee is going to be working closely with a couple of different groups to get stakeholder input that will inform the parent and family engagement tool, the reflection tool, and then use those results to plan some parent forums this year. And that's a new piece. We'll be broadening our outreach to parents. We'll be bringing to you at the October 14th meeting an information item that actually has all of the information on the indicators we've presented to you tonight. So it will be the actual report. We wanted to give you this information in advance, so when you see that information item, it would make sense to you, because you haven't seen several of you haven't seen this before, and it's been a whole year since we've done this, so it's easy to forget what it's all about. And then after October 14th, we will upload the text that describes our work into the dashboard by November 1st, so that we can say we have met all of those indicators. All right, any questions?
We did receive a thing from CSBA, that new template for LCAP. Is that what this is about also, or not? Or is that something totally different?
The new template will be the 2020-21
Okay.
LCAP, yes.
Okay.
They've made changes for it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I have a comment, and I know as I am part of the LCAP committee, and I know towards the end we were collaboratively working and finding ways how we could really engage our community. We were talking also about the language, that even teachers have a difficult time understanding the language, and how we would come about to facilitate and help parents be more engaged. I know, Dr. Perez, you mentioned about having like some forums or different events, possibly having childcare. Do you recall that discussion? So how soon would we go ahead and take action? I know it's a new school year and hopefully parents are more willing to participate.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question because it gives us an opportunity to kind of advertise some of the plans that we have for parent engagement this year. Dr. Jeffries, would you share
Yes,
what is in the works?
So as Dr. Stark mentioned, right now we're in the process of using the tool to get even more information. So we did receive information from the LCAP committee last year, valuable information. I have that information and have been looking through it and starting some basic planning. Now we're also using the tools so we can continue to fine tune that plan. I am in the process of working with Dr. Stark right now, and then we'll be working with Dr. Perez to actually put together at least 1 or 2 forums, parent forums, where we will invite parents to come in. And we are planning to do just that. What we talked at our LCAP meeting is looking for ways that we can make sure that we reduce those barriers so that families can participate in a manner that is understandable to them, not only in their native language, but also just bringing that education ease down a notch so that it's much more accessible. So we're in the process of doing that right now. Our goal is that we can get up and running by the end of the fall. This is a big task. Because we have this new tool, we want to make sure that we have as much information before we jump in as possible. But yes, that is in the planning for this school year. So we're looking forward to that.
So, Dr. Jeffrey, you mentioned that language could be a barrier. And I noticed that in previous board meetings, members of the community are being brave or courageous now coming out. Unfortunately, they're what I see is afraid to ask for a translator. Would we have a Spanish translator? And is that translator certified to translate? Because Spanish it's not literal. Like when we try to, at least for me, if you try to interpret something and translate it literally, it doesn't make sense. So you have to be able to have a great skill, which I don't have. And so I couldn't translate, and I don't dare translate in any IEP meeting. But that's why I would prefer to have someone that specializes in translating. So people in the audience hear what is being said correctly.
Yes, and we are working on that. And that's one of the logistical pieces that we are putting a lot of planning into. If you come to any of our DLAC meetings, we do have in the moment translating, and that's what we're working toward. We're possibly looking at creating a forum where we have groups of tables where people are speaking to direct questions related to the LCAP or the local indicators, in which case I'm working on having people who, it's not just translation, it's communicating in the moment in that particular language. And because this is such a big task, just dealing with the different languages, that's one of the reasons that I have to take it slowly in order for it to be successful, to make sure that I do actually have enough translators, because I completely agree, it's not just a matter of a one-to-one translation. Mm-hmm. So yes, that is definitely an area that we are considering and planning for.
I also have a question on that. I piggyback on Board Member De Leon. That is correct. I would like to know if our translators are certified, because in the last meeting, the translators, what I heard through the community, and I also watched it, was that the translation wasn't totally the way it should be. So I just would like to look into that. And also on the forums, could they be in the evening and on Saturdays so that the more parents could be able to go to these forums? Because during the day, if a parent works, they sometimes can't attend.
So at this point in time, we are planning them for Saturday.
Perfect. Any other questions or any other comments? Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. And last but not least, Mr. Frutos will share about an update on our Measure I projects. And Cindy, our Director of Maintenance and
And
Operations.
normally, we would have Scott Law here with me, board members, but Mr. Law has a terrible cold. But as we were talking this afternoon, he actually is a very proud person of his projects. So we were on the phone at about 5 o'clock. He sent me a couple of more pictures and said, don't forget to show the board this wonderful project. So we actually have a presentation that has one additional picture that he sent, and I think it just shows that even when somebody's a little under the weather, they're still interested in sharing the information that they have. Cindy DePaul is our Director of Maintenance, and when Scott is not available, Cindy typically is the person that works on facilities projects. When Cindy's not available, Scott can be a backup in the area of maintenance. What we're going to do today is a fairly brief presentation, but it does have a lot of information. We wanted to bring to you an update on facilities as our Measure I projects. And the first thing that we wanted to show is a snapshot of what we have done over the last couple of years. To remind the board, our bond was approved in November 2016. $106 million originally was supposed to be distributed over about 10 years, just the sequencing of financing. Because of our good credit rating and a couple of other things we've done that I will remind you of, we've been able to shorten that to about 8 years, which is really good news and not easy to do. But if you look at this grid, which we actually have on the website, we recently updated with September information, you see the list of 22 projects that were approved under the bond language. And now you see a new column called Bond Sequence Financial with the letters A or B. What the A means was the first issuance that we did in July of 2017 for about $25 million. And as you will see from our later on the quick financial report, we've almost used all of it. The second issuance, which is B, was for $30 million, and we issued that on April of 2019, just a few months ago. And we have started using some of those funds. The majority of those are for the Zamboni project and to pay back some of our prior year financing. We have made this available to our community on a regular basis. We update it. As you can see on the upper right corner, we have an update of 912. The one that we have finished about a week ago was 910. And by the time we do the annual report, we believe we'll have an October update. All our projects are listed. The ones that are in darker green are the projects that have been touched with the current financing. Doesn't mean that we finished all of them. It just means that we have done some work in those projects. I'm pleased to tell you that about a year ago, we have touched 9 of 22. As of a week ago, we have started at least working on 17 out of 22. So a lot of progress in this process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy so she can get all the accolades for the beautiful pictures.
Yeah, this is fun taking credit for the work that I didn't do, but we will benefit maintenance-wise for the district. What you see is that there was a lot of work done at 5 different schools, 6 different schools now, for infrastructure for electrical. And what we're really doing is maintaining our electrical systems that are now sometimes 70, 80, or even 90 years old. And as you know, the traditional classroom that was built way back when only had a few outlets, and our use of electricity has increased. And so, therefore, we have to change out our infrastructure that is aging. Next is a little summary of amazing work that's been done. And refreshing a classroom can really change the environment. There's a lot of support from Ed Services to try to have work posted in the room. So you'll see that Scott and his team has completed 100 rooms renovated in the last 14 months. And that means, and I'll show you a few pictures, a number of things that are done. And again, it's maintaining the classroom by refreshing and assuring that everything is proper and functional. You'll see in these pictures a replacement of carpet. In the right-hand side, you see the tackable bulletin board that's like this, where you can post, so you don't have tape all over and peeling paint. It supports our maintenance because we no longer have to paint rooms. We just have that tackable system that lasts for 30, 40 years. And then you see roof repair, and you also see on some of our portable buildings that there has been replacement of the plywood system that has deteriorated for any type of reason. It could be water, it could be termites, and just life. In those room renovations, what you see is all of the electrical is now confined behind that tackboard system. If you remember, the old rooms had conduit running outside because you needed to add one outlet. It was the only way to do it because they're plaster walls. Whenever Scott does a renovation, they make sure, and we call it burying all the electric. And now for the money.
So one of the important things for us is to come to you on an annual basis and give you two reports. One, did we finish the audit of the prior year and how does it look? And that comes with the annual audit. The second is a report of what have we been doing with the money. And even though we are still on pre-audit, our Bond Oversight Committee, we are planning a meeting in October, we'll see this report, and we're still working on finalizing a few things. By and large, it's done. And I wanted to walk you through a few of the projects. In 1819, we spent approximately $6 million in our projects. A lot of the work went to our 9th grade school renovation. We are about to finish all the planning for our covered walkways, which is a project that was planned from the beginning of the bond for Tanner School. Tanner School is a school that was built without shade. And there were a lot of things that we needed to make sure that that school had ready for us to move forward, but it's almost finished with DSA for approval. There's also a lot of renovations of classrooms, district drinking fountains at our schools. One of the most pleasant projects that we've done is to put new filtered drinking fountains at every one of our sites, and those seem to be very well accepted by all our schools. Modernizations of schools, traffic relief, elementary schools retrofit. As you will see in some of the pictures, all you have to do is drive over to PHS West or to Lincoln to see what a school can look like, even though they're close to 100 years old. But when they're renovated, they look very, very nice. Moving on, even though we just started the year, we have a significant amount of projects going on. Now this, you are seeing a very preliminary estimate. You will see this report next year when we come to you with actuals, because it is for the current year. And basically what we are looking at right now is continuing the work at Zamboni. Right now, those plans are being finalized. Cindy, Scott, myself had an opportunity to witness the architects and our tradespersons working last week. We implemented a new process that I've used before, which is we bring the architect and our experts, the air conditioning person, the electrician, Cindy, Scott, and they battle it with blueprints on a table. And the idea is that by the time we finish, everybody agrees on everything that we are doing, so that the day of the yellow ribbon cutting ceremony, nobody's walking around going, oh, that's the wrong brand of air conditioner or filter or what have you. And that agreement between the systems, it seems to have worked very, very well. We had several of our technicians that said, this works really well. We want to continue doing this process. So that's part of this year's project expense system. And finally, our review of multi-year. So now we're giving you everything that we have done up until now. In 17-18, we spent about $12 million in our projects. In 18-19, as I mentioned, almost $6 million. This year, we are at $1.5 million. So remember, the first issuance was $25 million. We've spent a total of 24 already in our 3 years worth of projects. Now, on the second issuance, which we had in 2019, we We brought in about $30 million, so I wanted to remind you, Zamboni will consume more than 20. We used $3 million to make a first payment on something called bridge financing. And I wanted to remind you what that is. In 1997 through 2001, the district borrowed about $36 million. Those $36 million went onto a long-term payment because we were not getting bonds at the time. And we've been paying about 1% a year since 1997. Not a lot, because when you have $35 million and you pay 1% a year, how many years will it take you to pay it off? 100. So what we did 2 years ago is from 1997 to 2001, the district had paid approximately 20%. 22 years, paid 20%. In the last 2 years, we want to thank the board. You allowed us to do two things. One, to take out the security deposit, which was our own money, in the bridge financing for a total of $2.7 million. And secondly, we used $3 million of the proceeds from the bond to pay close to $6 million. So in the last 2 years, we have actually paid 17% more of that loan. And the goal is to use more of these issuances to pay more and more, because technically we were mostly just paying interest. It's a good way to get us into a better financial place. I wanted to remind you that in March of 2019, we got a credit update. And the credit upgrade took us from A1 to double A3 for the first time. That allowed us to reduce our interest rate significantly. Why did we get a credit rating increase? There were two main reasons. One, Moody's and Standard & Poor's said you have a very strong program and you have very strong district reserves. You may remember that a couple of weeks ago we came to you, started talking to you about financing and our potential losses with enrollment and our reserves. Our reserves have created this credit rating mechanism. So everything works together. And the second piece was the high quality of our system, the fact that we have a stable governance team is something that the rating agencies look at. They look at everything we do. They see our board meetings. They see everything. And in October, they're going to come again and rate us. So we hope that we can tell them we do fantastic. So if there are no questions on the expenses, we're going to continue with the next series of projects. Before I pass it on to Cindy, I wanted to tell you we're very proud of our paint work. Our schools have been very patient. A lot of the work has been done even when we are in session. The left is one of our schools before the paint, and the right is one of our schools after. A lot of our schools are looking really, really nice simply because of new tones and new paint schemes as well as brand new windows. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy.
One of the exciting projects has been to actually take a look at our kitchens and our NPR rooms. So those are our cafeterias, and they also double as our meeting spaces for parents and families. And what you see here is actually at Wirtz School, where they did a full demolition of all of the flooring and all of the wall systems. And I think I thought there might be, okay, there's a picture. That's the before. So hold on. We're going to get to see the after picture in just a bit. Here's an example of the window replacement that Ruben was speaking about. It's very non-invasive, so it's pop in, pop out, and it really makes it low cost. And we've been able to do replacements at all of these schools. It's just absolutely amazing. It's 5 schools, and it's been on our #1 list to do for a very long time. So we're very glad to be able to do this because we had old single pane windows that were not energy efficient. Some of them were the old plastic, so they were clouded. And what this does is it reflects a lot of sunlight out, and that keeps our rooms cooler, and we use less energy as a result. I mentioned not only do we do the multi-purpose rooms, but there's been renovations of the kitchens. These are original kitchens from back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Equipment may have been upgraded, but actually the whole facility now has been looked at. And so that really gives an opportunity for the food service workers that work so hard from 5:30 in the morning all the way through to review the workspace, review the workflow, and make some small improvements by maintaining the system that we do have. And so it's been very welcome and hope that it can continue. That work that we do includes opening up the walls and taking a look at all of the pipe systems. And so infrastructure work has also been done. And again, we clean up the old electrical as well. So no more conduit. Not that we're anti-conduit, but the other fun part has also been making sure aesthetics are addressed. At Moakler School, you can see there's an outdoor reading area for our upper grade students, and it has a nice, pleasant, calm environment for the students to be able to read and to discuss things. And that has been a beautiful renovation. It was originally there, it has just been refreshed. And then over at Gaines School, you'll see a nice planter bed that when you're entering from the rear parking lot, you see this, but also all of the children that march out to the playfield come by and see this. So it does add some beauty to the school. And what you see is outdoor renovations. This is just a snapshot of 2, but there's been 5 schools that have been addressed. This is the fun project at Gaines Elementary School. There's a very small playfield in the rear of the campus, and little children wear out fields in a much faster pace than their older fellows. And so we've had a hard time keeping up on the maintenance of the field. And so we experimented with Mr. Frutos's permission this year, and with one of our licensed contractors supporting our in-house staff, we actually put in an artificial turf field. It's small, but it is used every day. And I learned today that they even have a little after-school boys soccer club. So, and that's at grade 2 and 3. So couldn't be cuter, but it's green, it's clean, and it's clear. Ruben, I think you were going to talk a little bit about Odyssey.
One of the projects that the facilities team is working on is the different facilities needs at Odyssey STEM Academy. You will see from the budget sequencing that the conversion of classrooms was our first priority this year to be ready for the first wave of students. As the second and future years are coming, we are able to also provide some specialized programs like this sustainability system that's on the back of the campus. This is a new system that they brought in that includes a variety of garden systems that they will be using, and again, facilities that are being improved and renovated in areas that before were just open spaces. We've also done a lot of traffic mitigation. As you know, in some cases, the traffic mitigation has been on the street, like at Lincoln, but in the majority of our projects, they're within our property, where we bring in the traffic and create new queues and new systems so that the traffic moves either faster or so that the drop-off points are safer and can move in a more effective way. And finally, this is the new picture that I was just sent today. Remember that old picture on the upper left side? This is the brand new Wizard facility at Works. So that is their new multipurpose room, brand new, and it looks beautiful. So we thank you for allowing us to do all these projects. The bond financing second sequence has been now completed. Right now, my goal is to continue to work with our credit rating agencies and to try to reduce the project from the 10 to 8 years. Maybe we can do them all in 7. As I mentioned to you, we are going to be getting a credit rating in the next 2 months. So they're probably watching this, or they will be soon. And we'll continue working in Zamboni. We are going to continue our portable replacement project. As you know, we got a lot of buildings for $1, but after that, we had to submit to DSA. And that has taken a significant amount of time just because of all the infrastructure work that needs to be done. The Metro project obviously will have an impact on us. We shared with some of our colleagues that depending on how soon they finish, it'll have an impact on our facilities on the high school campuses. We're trying to move our projects through all the approval process as quickly as we can. But once they land on DSA, it is a minimum of 6 to 9 months at this point. Our bid contract award and construction process is accelerating, especially for Zamboni. We are planning on bringing you some ideas so that the projects can move a little faster within the next couple of months. And finally, we're going to start the planning stage for the third wave of projects, which we hope we will have some financing ideas by next year. And with that, we open it to any questions or to any
questions?
I have a question. Mr. Frutos, you mentioned that in October, there will be a oversight committee meeting.
Yes.
If you could, do you know exactly when?
Right now, we are looking at October 23rd at 5:30. As you know, we actually ask to make sure that we get committee members. I mentioned to the board that we have records that many years ago, sometimes only one or two would show up. We want to have at least 3 or 4, and by and large, we've had at least 4 members. So right now, that's the date that we have, and if anything changes, we will let you know, but it looks pretty good for that.
And then my last comment, Dr. Perez, are we working on like having a board, a calendar? That way we could put like these dates that are, well, I consider important.
Not only that, I think by the board allowing us to hire a person that can manage the website for the district, we can have these things placed on there and updated regularly. So that is the goal. And in response to your question, I do have, and I spoke to Madam President about this, because that's, we need to talk about at a retreat, our goals for things like this. And one of the issues we're having is scheduling a Saturday, but I don't want to interrupt this topic, so I'll let the board members ask their questions on Measure I, and then we can come back to that.
I have a question. I know Zamboni's not done yet, and I think what I'm going to bring up, I don't think we've thought about it, at least in the planning stage. I don't know if it's too late, but have we thought about restrooms for the LGBT community, the transgender restroom? I know a lot of facilities do have them, and I was just wondering for the future. I know we can't do all schools, but the high school and Zamboni and different schools. How are we looking into that?
Well, actually, it is a very appropriate question, President Gomez. We had that discussion with our design team about 6 months ago, and it didn't come about for just one group. It actually came about looking into the future. You are allowing us to build you a building that, if you look at Lincoln, that's what, 90 years? So it'll be way into the future. So what we were looking at, can we have facilities that have some flexibility? And in some cases, the design of the buildings, and we will bring you a note so that you see what the architect recommending, includes not only the old style of restrooms that have multiple facilities within, but separate facilities that can have some flexibility in the labeling, in what they can be used for. Why are we doing that? Well, the law is evolving. There used to be that a separate facility might have been appropriate. But recently, there are some individuals that don't want to feel discriminated by being sent to a separate facility. So you need to have the flexibility of multiple iterations of any type of facility like restrooms. And that's the piece that we're talking to the architect. We might not know what will be the concern 10 years from now, 15 years from now. So flexibility in design, we believe, is the most important thing that we can bring to you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? None, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
That concludes all our presentations this evening, board members, and just want to encourage you all that if any questions come later, you were used to that, feel free to jot them down, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Madam President, can I bring up the issue of the time for a board retreat to have it in the evenings? We've been looking at dates as requested by the board since October 5th and 12th would not work on a Saturday for a retreat. And the reality is that in looking at the calendar for October and November, it doesn't work either. We have some holidays there, backing into that Monday, the Saturday, like Veterans, where people like to go away. We have other activities that are taking place. Some members are at conferences. And then in November, we have the Thanksgiving break. And we just have conflict after conflict for those 2 months. And I don't suggest that we prolong the goal setting much longer, because we want, as a staff, to be able to work on the board's goals as soon as possible, whatever they turn out to be. and have more time for implementation. So I was going to suggest as an idea that we have the retreat in the evening as we do like a study session, but it's not a study session, it's the retreat from 5:30 on. We could bring in dinner for the board and staff and the facilitators in an evening, like a Wednesday night, to set some goals that we can begin working on.
I think that's a great idea. I think we need to move forward. So do we have some dates we can look at?
Well, that was going to be my next step if the board is okay with it. I will, with this Wednesday report, I'll get some dates together. I'll speak to the facilitators to see what Wednesdays they might be available. And then you would have to vote on it at the October meeting. So we would have it after the October meeting as soon as possible.
Great, that would be great.
Any objections
On a
or
Wednesday, go ahead.
concerns about that?
On a Wednesday?
I would suggest a Wednesday.
Perfect.
Yes.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Yesenia, you
Yesenia?
no objection at all? Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Very welcome. With that said, any other questions from board members? Any comments? None so. It's 8:45. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll move.
Sonia De Leon made the motion. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Yesenia Cuarenta made the second. Any questions, any comments? None so. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. Meeting adjourned.